Hi, my name is Bella. My husband and I have been married for 2 years. I had a terrible time finding love until I was 27 years old. I went to an elite middle and high school for girls only, and then I went to a university for women only. After I graduated, I got a job as a receptionist at a big company. As you might expect, all of my coworkers were women. For most of the people in my social circle, business leaders would ask them to parties, but not me. I never went to those kinds of events. It was easy to understand why talking to guys made me so nervous that I couldn't even speak. People often told me how nice I looked, and I was asked out a few times. There were some nice guys at dinner, but they always told me, "You're pretty, but there's not much else to you." After that, it happened. The door to my fate opened. Can I ask Bella to go on a date with me? This is what Lex, who worked for one of our clients and always checked in at my desk, told me. Since he would only give me his contact information, people around us thought we were dating, but it wasn't true. I just smiled at him when he tried to start a conversation, like I did with everyone else. I really thought I would always be single, but when he told me, everything changed. May I suggest that we begin our relationship as friends? That was my answer. Got off guard. He nodded so excitedly that it looked like his head would fall off. He smiled as he walked into the office. I had never done that before. Guy questions like, "Want to have dinner?" had always been the norm up until now. "Free tonight." But when I was with Lex, I didn't get that sense. I only felt love. I was so happy. I went on a few dates with him, but I was still nervous and didn't talk much. The moment I knew he liked me for who I was, I knew. Is it possible for you and I to be together? To the point of tears, he was so happy. All of this took place on Christmas 2 years ago. At that moment, I was very happy and thought I would always have someone so loving in my life. But there was a hole in his armor when his business failed. Now it's been 2 years, and I'm 29. "Lex, you should probably wake up now," I told my husband, who was still asleep. Then I put on my shoes and left the house. I'm the only one making money for our family right now. My husband's business went out of business 6 months ago, and he hasn't had a job since. It's been hard for him to find a job. This business is in a bad field, and the economy is also bad. Sometimes he gets an offer for a job that pays only $2,000 a month, which makes it hard for him to commit to a new job. Even with all of this, I still support him. Our love isn't so shallow that it would fade if one of us lost our job. My pay has always been pretty low. We've never lived a fancy life. We rent a 2-bedroom flat that is more than 30 years old. It's a 30-minute walk from the train stop, and the building isn't safe. But I was ready to give up a lot of things so that we could keep living together. I thought my husband might still be upset about his company going out of business. He had a few job offers, and I waited calmly because I thought he'd find a good fit and feel better. But my hope was short-lived, and he kept getting worse. Even taking out his anger on me by raising his hand sometimes was a sign of his stress. He didn't leave any permanent marks, and I thought he must be hurting more than I was. So I put up with it because I wanted to help. Then, after a few days, he finally got a new job. He quit the business he was in before and went into a whole new one. He took the job because the new place was ready to hire him, even though he didn't have much experience. I felt better when he got it because I knew I wouldn't have to be his hitting bag anymore. I thought he might be getting violent, but it looked like it was just a phase. He is now working hard at his new job and was even given the title of team leader. It's been a year, and I just turned 30. I was excited about having kids soon, but the loving man I married didn't seem to be there anymore. I told you I liked toast. Now tell me why you made pancakes. Also, take out the pit if you're going to serve fruit. Little things started to make my husband mad, and he started saying mean things. "Really, do you need to talk that way? Lex, you're an adult now." I snapped back. "Take out the pit yourself." I was getting angry. In response, he hit the wall with his hand, which scared me. I don't like to argue, but I know in my heart that what he's doing is mental abuse. Recently, I've tried not to upset him, but we've been fighting a lot, and I'm tired of it. When he took it out on me, that's when I lost it. It looked like the stress of his new job was to blame. Soon after, he was made team leader, which showed how good he was. Now everyone tells him he's going to be a department head very soon. He couldn't handle the extra stress, so he started hitting me, who was an easy target. In fact, I quit my job at 30 to stay at home and raise my kids. When I got into my 30s, I'd always planned to quit my job as a receptionist and do something I really enjoyed. Since my husband knew this, I stopped at age 30 as planned. He doesn't seem to like it though. Women need to work too these days. You should know that my pay is enough to take care of both of us. Do you even value the people who have taken care of you? He moans while he eats, then gets his bag and goes to work. I was there for him when he didn't have a job. So why am I being blamed now? That's when I started to mentally distance myself from him. When I got home one day, there were shoes I didn't recognize at the door. There was my mother-in-law in the living room, which caught me off guard. "Well, Mom, why are you here?" My mom told me straight out, "Didn't Lex tell you?" When I went up to her, "From today on, I'm moving in." This is something I've never heard before. Over time, I learned that my husband had suggested that my mother-in-law move, and because she was lonely after the death of my father-in-law. Of course, no one asked me that. While I was still shocked, my mother-in-law told me to start making dinner. It shows how valuable a housewife is to take care of her family, so she told her, "Get to work." Even though I was angry and confused, I went to the kitchen to make dinner. Then Lex's mother-in-law came in and said, "Lex hates burgers." The food was almost ready. "This is rubbish." The dish was almost done when she threw it away. I was seated inside, but strangely, words failed me when I was faced with this surprise event. I couldn't say anything, so I just listened as my mother-in-law went on. She then started going through the fridge and cooking without asking. I finally calmed down and told my mom, "Hold on." I made a list of meals for the week and then went shopping. As soon as I said that, he dumped flour on my head, making me cough. I kept watching her make her food, and then she told me to clean up. When my husband finally got home, he was thrilled to see the meal. "Yes, this is the kind of food I want. It's better to eat fried food than salad." He walked past me and happily sat down to eat with his mom. My heart felt like it had been smashed and black ink had been dropped on it at that moment. Following that, my mother-in-law continued to bother me every day, and my husband continued to hurt my feelings. I felt like I didn't belong in this house, and even though my husband wanted to be close to me, I couldn't because of the situation. As a 30-something woman, I have been putting off having a child because I don't want to have a kid with this abusive man. The last straw finally broke. My wife's mom asked me to take her to the hospital because she was sick. Even though I didn't want to be with her, I had to take her to the hospital, even though I didn't want to. But when I went to get her, a social worker told me to go to a different room. She told her, "You must be having a hard time taking care of the kids and doing all the housework by yourself. But taking it out on your husband and mother-in-law isn't good." It turns out that my mother-in-law was saying that I hurt her when I fell. Even worse, she had been to the hospital more than once and asked about me each time. It looks like she picked today to deal the last hit. The social worker blamed me because she didn't know the whole story. You should look out for kids and old people more. During that time, our family hasn't had any children. When I was told I might need psychological help, I had had enough. "You broke my rights, so I'll sue you. It's not you who is being mistreated here, it's me." I showed proof that my husband abused me and that my mother-in-law burned me on purpose. The social worker said she had to check with my mother-in-law, but I told her no and left the hospital by myself. Soon after, my husband and mother-in-law came home. My husband heard from my mother-in-law that I was mean to her. My husband shook his head and said, "You're leaving me, you parasite. How dare you leave my mother?" What kind of lie did my mother-in-law tell you? Based on her fake tears, I think she did it again. I was sick of telling her she was wrong, so I left the house without noticing either of them. I didn't go home that day. Instead, I stayed the night in a work hotel. I was lucky to have my wallet and cell phone with me, and it was easy to find a charger. I chose to avoid both of them for a while and not go back home. But as I walked by the house one day, I saw a woman in her 50s who lived across the street from our apartment. I was beginning to worry. I haven't seen you around. She also told me that your mom told her that you and your husband are going on vacation for about a week. When I heard that, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Then I asked myself, if not now, when? I called the moving company right away and asked them to help me move out as soon as possible. It was a little more expensive, but I didn't have much stuff, and the movers were able to get it all to my parents' house in just 3 days. Let's see how my husband and his mother react, since they have no idea how much I've helped with the house. They put me down when they don't know anything about me, and I won't forgive them. After moving, I went back to my parents' house because their house was empty. After a few days, my husband called me. "Where are you, Bella? There is no one in your room." When my husband found out what was going on, he kept asking me where I was. I told him, "Not your business. By the way, I've already filed for divorce because you've said you wanted to do it before. Sign them and send them in." After I hung up the phone with him, I stopped calling his number. After that, my life became peaceful. I did yoga, made breakfast, and then sat down with my parents at the table. I had lunch with my mom and dinner with my family again. That's how I felt, but it was comfort and happiness I hadn't felt in a long time. When I told my parents to thank you, they were surprised, but they were happy to see me. When my husband found out I was at my parents' house, he waited nearby for me. When I saw him, I tried to run away, but he caught up and grabbed my arm. "Call me Bella. Let's go home. Without you, the house is a mess." I yelled, "Help me," as his hold got tighter. As I was being helped, a high school boy in his sports uniform came by and called the cops. A businessman nearby also helped. Since the cops were there, my husband quietly left. But as expected, my angry mother-in-law stormed into my parents' house. "How dare you make fun of my son in public? Oh, you and your family are a shame." Finally, I stopped my dad from going up to them and told him, while I was doing that, my mother-in-law was outside our house making threats and even talking about defamation lawsuits. Dad was about to lose it and talk to her about it, but I stopped him. "Okay, I'm ready to settle this." I called my husband, who was standing next to my mother-in-law when the call came in. He told her straight out, "I know you're cheating, and I have proof. I'm going to sue you for abuse and get money when we get divorced." My husband became scared when he heard this. After hearing rumors that he was going to a hotel with a coworker, I actually paid a detective to find proof of his cheating. I had a lot of proof. I even went to the hospital and got a note saying I was healthy in case they tried something. I had also recorded talks in case I needed proof. I was going to talk to my husband and his mother about it when I was ready mentally. But I'm not going to be quiet when they insult my parents. My mother-in-law has also been stealing money from my pocket. I've heard that the house is in terrible shape and even smells bad since I left. People in the neighborhood are complaining, right? My husband didn't know what to say. A friend told me this story. They said my husband and his mother were not in town. It looks like they haven't been doing simple things like picking through the trash, and the house has become a dump. Besides that, I heard that the property management gets reports every day about the loud fights they have. Now my husband might understand how much I helped the family and want me to return, but it's too late. I'm not coming back to live happily ever after with your mom. After I said that, I put the phone down. Soon after, my wife's mom tried to break down my front door. They were both arrested after I called the cops. After the fact, my neighbor told me that they hadn't taken care of any of the complaints through the management business. The drama finally got so bad that it cleared out the whole apartment building. The management finally went to court against both of them for not paying rent, ignoring complaints, and making business difficult. They were being sued for money damages. They were finally told by the court to leave and pay money for harm. They can't rent anywhere now because they're on a list of people who can't rent. It turned out that the rent wasn't paid because my husband made a mistake at work that cost a lot of money and caused him to lose his job. He quit his job and moved far away because he couldn't find another place to live in the area. He then ran into another problem when he tried to find new work. He became homeless, which made his mother steal from stores. She was arrested for hitting a store worker who tried to talk to her. I read about this in the news online. I have no idea what comes next, and I don't want to know. When I got divorced, I started working at the coffee shop of my dreams. Someone I work with who is 5 years younger than me, and I became friends. I got married again when I was 34. We opened our dream cafe when we were 40, and now I'm pregnant. I'm pregnant at a late age, but I've never been happy.
After my husband's company became successful, he started acting different. He didn't hide the fact that he was seeing another woman. When I confronted him about it, he just laughed at me. "You don't make any money, so you should be happy I'm supporting you," he said. "Maybe then I'll think about getting a job." I told him I would find a job myself, and he just laughed and said I could do whatever I wanted. So I got a job at his parents' company, and that's when I decided to get back at him. My name is Karen, and I'm 34 years old. My husband Michael is 36 and runs a printing company. We used to work at the same place. I did illustrations and he worked in sales. We fell in love and got married when I was 26. Later, he left his job and we talked about starting our own company together. I wasn't sure what to do, so I talked to our business partner, Bob. We'd worked with Bob before, back at our old job. He was the CEO there and had his hands in lots of different businesses, especially dealing with advertising. Bob liked my illustrations and was keen to support us. He even put some money into our new venture. "I really like Karen's drawings," he said. "I'm grateful for her talent. Together, we'll make this company a success." I told Bob that I was on board, and we started running the company together. At first, things were tough. We lived in a small apartment, but once the company started doing well, we could afford to move into a fancy condo. That's when my husband asked me to stop working and focus on being a homemaker. "I'll find someone else to do the illustrations. I want you to support me," he said. I felt like I had to go along with it, but I knew I had to tell Bob about what was happening. He had invested in our company, so he deserved to know. "I'm really sorry, but I have to stop doing the illustrations," I told him. Bob seemed genuinely upset. "I'll miss seeing your drawings, Karen. If you ever want to start again, just let me know. I'll always be here to help." "Thank you so much," I said gratefully. So I started focusing on being a homemaker to help my husband out. But I couldn't give up drawing completely, so I started sharing my illustrations as a hobby on Instagram. People really liked them, and it became my little secret joy. Even though I stopped working, my husband's company kept growing. Our life got better too. He got a new car, and he started buying expensive suits from famous brands. I didn't really get why he needed all that, but I guess it's important to look good when you're the boss. No matter how busy he got, my husband always made time for dinner at home. It was something we promised each other. Even when things got hectic, he insisted on having that time just for us. We'd sit down, have dinner, and he'd tell me about the future plans for the company. I was happy just to be there for him and support his dreams. I thought it would always be like that. The company kept doing well, but I started noticing a change in my husband. He stopped talking to me about the company during dinner. "How's work going?" I'd ask. "Fine," he'd say, not really interested. I kept asking him about work, wanting to know more, but he snapped at me, saying I wouldn't understand because I'm always at home. It hurt to hear him talk to me like that. I tried to tell myself he was just tired and stressed. That night, he finished his meal quietly and went straight to bed. This went on for a while, and then he started eating dinner out. He'd make excuses about socializing or work events, but he used to always eat at home. Even then, I'd wait for him delaying my dinner, but now he'd just leave without a word. And recently, he wouldn't even bother sending an excuse. When I brought it up, he'd just yell at me. It felt like he was a different person. I started to feel like nothing more than a servant to him, and it made me really upset. When we started the company, we went through tough times together. But now, I felt like I was beneath even his employees. I didn't do housework because I liked it. I did it because I wanted to help him achieve his dreams. But he didn't seem grateful for any of it anymore. While my husband was away, I found solace in my illustrations. It was the only thing that helped me relax. As I kept drawing, more people started following me, leaving kind comments. Even Bob's name popped up among them. He offered to work together again. and just the thought of it made me feel hopeful. Without that hope, I don't know if I could have kept going. As we stopped having dinner together, a gap started growing between my husband and me. Eventually, I started suspecting there was another woman in his life. I smelled a different perfume on his jacket, one he'd never use. When I asked him about it, he just brushed it off, smirking like being caught wouldn't matter. For the first time, my sadness turned into anger. I was tired of being mocked and left alone at home, unable to do anything but chores. I felt anxious about being left behind by society. My friends envied me, but they didn't understand. Even my parents laughed it off as a fancy worry. I had to face this problem alone. Then, one day, my husband came home drunk. I took care of him and put him to bed, but I noticed a lipstick mark on his shirt. There was no way he'd have that mark for no reason. It was like a message from the other woman, a declaration of war. Finally, I had proof of his cheating. The next day, I confronted him with the shirt. "Where were you last night? And what's this kiss mark?" I demanded, pointing at the mark on his shirt. My husband looked surprised by the kiss mark but didn't seem bothered by my questions. "I was out with friends at a bar. It must have happened then, right?" His tone was dismissive. "You'd have to take off your jacket for that to happen. Didn't you notice?" I said I don't remember, he continued, suddenly standing up. His hand came down hard on my cheek in a sharp slap. Stumbling backward, I struggled to process what had just happened. All I felt was a burning pain on my cheek. "When will you get it? Who do you think is providing for us?" My husband's words pierced the air as he walked away, leaving me behind with tears streaming down my face. It felt like my husband didn't love me anymore. The harsh reality shattered me. After that, my husband's behavior became violent whenever he was unhappy. If he didn't like the meal I made, he'd throw the plate on the floor. "This tastes terrible. Don't you know what I like to eat?" he'd yell. "If you want to stay married to me, you better improve your cooking." Every time he erupted like this, I felt like I was walking on eggshells. "Wait, I'll make what you like," I'd beg, but he never listened. "I'll just eat out. Your food will affect my work," he'd say dismissively. I'd chase after him, desperate to fix things. "But you're never home or talk to me. How can I make something you like?" I'd ask, tears filling my eyes. Clearly irritated by my desperation, my husband clicked his tongue. "So do you want a divorce? I'm fine with it. I can manage without you, but you can't manage without me, can you?" he sneered. "You're worthless, not making any money. You're just living off me like a parasite," he spat out, his words cutting deep into my heart. That was the moment something inside me broke. The loving and caring husband I once knew seemed gone. "I'll find a job," I declared, my voice shaking with determination. "What? What are you talking about?" My husband laughed, his tone dripping with scorn. "Who would hire someone as useless as you?" I gritted my teeth, trying to contain my anger. I couldn't let myself lose control and end up facing more abuse. Since I couldn't fight back physically, I had to find another way to stand up for myself. "Fine, do whatever you want," my husband sneered. "But don't forget about your house chores with your measly income. I won't tolerate neglect." As soon as he left, I sprang into action. I hired a detective to gather evidence of my husband's affair. It didn't take long before I had plenty of photos showing him with other women, drinking, and going into hotels together. 1 week after gathering the evidence, I went to a fancy restaurant on the top floor of a hotel. I wore my best clothes, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being out of place among the wealthy clientele. Bob was already at the table when I arrived. "I'm sorry for being late," I said nervously. "Don't worry at all, Karen. I've been looking forward to our meeting," Bob said warmly, motioning for me to sit. "Waiting for you was no trouble at all." Bob had been a big help when my husband and I started our own business. Now, he was the president of my husband's parent company. "Thank you for supporting us when we went independent," I said gratefully. "I was surprised when you and your husband decided to go independent, but since we've worked together for so long, supporting you financially was a no-brainer," Bob replied. "It seems like your company is thriving, thanks to your efforts." Bob's expression turned serious as he spoke. "But today, let's focus on you accepting my invitation, all right?" he said, offering a reassuring smile. "Yes, of course," I said, sitting up straight and returning his greeting. Bob had always been a big fan of my illustrations. He backed us financially when we decided to go independent because he believed in what I could do. He was also the one person who encouraged me not to give up my career to become a homemaker. We lost touch for a while, but he found me on social media and reached out, I explained. We started talking again through email and text messages. But you always understood my illustrations so well, didn't you? I asked, hoping to confirm our shared understanding. I've always been a fan of your work, and I'm really happy you didn't give up on illustrating, Bob replied warmly. But I never expected you to accept my offer to join my team. Bob had offered me a job as an illustrator before, but I turned him down because of my household responsibilities. Still, he kept reaching out to me, and it was only a week ago that I finally agreed to join him. In a conversation with my husband, Bob seemed hesitant at first, but then he looked me straight in the eyes. I hate to say this, but Michael's company has a pretty bad reputation. What? Really? I was shocked. Everything my husband told me about his job seemed positive, so this news from Bob caught me off guard. I've been working with him for a long time, but ever since the business started growing, the quality of work has gone down. Bob explained. Deadlines are missed, mistakes happen, and he doesn't seem to take responsibility for it. Is this reputation widely known? Well, with his company growing so fast, it's bound to attract attention. But now, it's the wrong kind of attention. There are even rumors about him getting involved with a shady group, Bob said, his tone serious. I had no idea, I admitted, realizing how little I actually knew about my husband's business. Trying to change the subject, Bob said cheerfully, anyway, you'll be creating illustrations for us now. No need to outsource anymore. It's a big win for our company. I really appreciate you being flexible and understanding about my family situation, I said, feeling grateful. It's okay. We don't believe in overworking our employees anyway, Bob said with a reassuring smile. And so I started my job with Bob. My role was solely focused on creating illustrations, so I didn't need to go into the office. Bob allowed me to work from home, which meant I could balance my work with my household responsibilities. Drawing, something I truly loved, brought me so much joy. It had started as a hobby, but now I was thrilled to be working on commissions. As I was working one day, I heard the door slam loudly. When I went to investigate, I found my husband standing there, his eyes filled with rage. You traitor, he suddenly spat out. I was caught off guard by my husband's sudden outburst. To think my own wife would steal my job. That's when it hit me. The reason for his anger became clear. Since I started working with Bob, I began getting contracts with other companies. Thanks to Bob's recommendations, I managed to secure deals smoothly, and most of these companies were partners with my husband's business. This was my way of getting back at him. It must have been frustrating for him to have jobs taken away by the very person he underestimated. You don't have any right to say anything to me. I've just been doing my job, and you gave me permission, I said calmly, meeting his rage with determination. My husband's anger burned in his eyes, but I didn't back down. Go ahead. Hit me if you want. I'll call the police, I declared firmly. The police? My husband's anger seemed to lessen a bit at the mention of law enforcement. My company is failing because of you. What are you trying to do? He shouted, desperation edging into his voice. It's not my fault, I replied calmly. I retrieved the divorce papers and handed them to him. We're not husband and wife anymore. Don't be absurd. You're divorcing me because my company is failing. You're just after my money, he accused, his words dripping with bitterness. I could have divorced you at any time, but I thought now was the right time. I have a lot of work now, and I'm making money, I retorted, showing him the evidence of his affair. My husband, hearing everything, fell to his knees and begged, please, please. The company is in trouble. I can't handle compensation or a divorce on top of everything. Please support me. Everyone else has abandoned me as soon as they found out the company was struggling. You're the only one who hasn't. I didn't listen to his desperate plea. I left the house with only my work tools and a change of clothes. The next time I returned was to pick up my belongings after the divorce was finalized. My husband's company was making mistakes left and right, and no one wanted to work with him. He spent his days begging to pay me compensation. Meanwhile, I started living on my own, making a living from my illustrations. I became quite wealthy, but I never forgot my integrity, using my ex-husband's actions as a lesson in what not to do. My dad suddenly got very sick and had to go to the hospital. I can't go on our honeymoon because I need to be with him. So my husband says I should go alone. I was really excited about our honeymoon, but now it's not happening. My husband thinks I should still go by myself. But who goes on a honeymoon alone? Then something unexpected happened. My father-in-law, who was supposed to be in the hospital, appeared in front of me. Why are you here, father-in-law? My name is Sarah. I've been with Mark for 5 years, and he finally asked me to marry him this summer. Looking back, those 5 years felt like a long time. We started visiting Mark's parents' house about a year into our relationship, and he met my parents who live far away too. But he always said, let's wait until work is more settled, without making a definite plan to get married. Lately he even joked, why change anything? This made me worried. Mark, I'm turning 30 soon. If you're not going to be honest with me, we might need to end things. After I said that, Mark finally asked me to marry him. We were close to each other's families and had already talked about everything, from our wedding plans to our honeymoon destination. All that was left was to make those plans happen. We decided to have a small wedding with just our closest friends and family. The only thing left was our honeymoon. Mark planned to spend the day at his parents' house to spend time with them. I had dinner with my parents, who came from out of town, and then went home alone. I packed our bags for the honeymoon and sent Mark a text before bed. Mark, you did great today. I'm all set for our honeymoon tomorrow. I'm really excited about going to Italy. But I didn't hear back from Mark. I figured he must have been really tired from the wedding and fell asleep. I hoped he wouldn't oversleep for our flight the next day. Feeling a bit worried, I eventually fell asleep. The next morning, I got a call from Mark. Sarah, something really bad happened, Mark said quickly as soon as I answered the phone. My dad collapsed and he's in the hospital. You'll have to go on our honeymoon alone today. What? What do you mean? I was shocked. But your dad seemed fine at our wedding yesterday, didn't he? I'm just as surprised as you, Sarah. I need to stay with him, but you should still go on the honeymoon without me. That's crazy. If your dad's sick, I can't just leave for our honeymoon. Who goes on a honeymoon alone anyway? I asked which hospital his dad was in, but Mark wouldn't tell me. If I told you, you'd want to come visit, right? Of course I would. Dad knows how much you've been looking forward to going to Italy. He insisted I should still let you go. Please respect his wishes. I won't be able to enjoy myself with everything that's happening. Will you come join me once he's feeling better? Definitely, I'll be there as soon as things calm down here. Don't say as soon as things are settled, it might jinx it. Please, let me handle things here and go to Italy as planned. I'm almost at the hospital, so I won't be able to answer your calls. Talk to you later. Well, wait, Mark. I tried to say, but he hung up before I could get a word in. I called back right away, but his phone was off. I didn't even know which hospital he was heading to, so I couldn't rush to be with my father-in-law. Feeling helpless, the doorbell rang, startling me. When I opened the door, I was shocked. Father-in-law? There he was, standing at the door, supposed to be in a hospital after collapsing. Are you okay? Your legs? They're working. I stammered, feeling like I was seeing a ghost. What do you mean? My father-in-law looked confused as I checked if he was really there. Are you feeling all right? Oh, I had a bit too much to drink at the wedding yesterday, but I'm fine now. Sober as a judge this morning, and I drove here just fine after dropping Mark off. After dropping Mark off? Yeah, you're going on your honeymoon, right? I dropped him off at the station, but then I realized I should have come to pick you up too. Let me take you to LaGuardia. I was really confused. My father-in-law, who was supposed to be in the hospital, dropped Mark off at the station. None of this made any sense. Then it hit me. My father-in-law mentioned LaGuardia, but we're supposed to fly from JFK to Italy, not LaGuardia Airport. You said you'd take me to LaGuardia, but our honeymoon is in Italy. Oh yes, that's what I thought too. I was surprised when Mark told me this morning that we changed our plans last minute and decided to go to Alaska instead. Alaska. The more I heard, the more confused I became. Mark said we're going to Alaska. Yeah, he did. He left a note in the car. My father-in-law showed me a post-it that Mark had left in the car. It had the name of an inn in Alaska and a flight from LaGuardia to Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport written on it. When I saw it, everything started to make sense. Can you take me to LaGuardia then? Of course. Traffic shouldn't be too bad. We'll probably get there around the same time as Mark's train. Thank you so much. On the way, I couldn't stop thinking about Mark's behavior. Whether my guess was right or not, I find out when I saw him at the airport. I thanked my father-in-law and went into the airport. Near the check-in counter for the Alaska flight, I saw Mark right away. He was with another woman, cozying up together and picking out drinks. My suspicions were confirmed. He had been cheating on me. Maybe it started while we were living together. His reluctance to get married might have been because of her. And now, not only was he having an affair, but he was also going on a trip with her on the day of our honeymoon. I stood boldly in front of him. Mark, holding drinks and about to leave the store, saw me and looked shocked. Sarah, what are you doing here? Same question to you. Why are you, who should have been at the hospital with your dad, here? I just came to buy some stuff. Stuff? Did you really come all the way to LaGuardia just to buy drinks? Yeah, Dad wanted some specific airport water. That's funny you say that because I was just with your father. Huh? Your dad came to pick me up in his car. He seemed perfectly fine, which was a big surprise. Oh right, after we talked, he suddenly felt better. He's always been resilient. Mark was sticking to his story. Amidst my shock, I couldn't help but think, what excuse will he come up with next? So who's this woman? Where were you two planning to go? Well, oh right, she's the nurse who looked after Dad. We're going to check out a rehab center for him in Alaska. Your excuses are painful to hear. I was speechless and sighed in disbelief. Enough. Your lies are giving me a headache. It's not a lie, she's really my dad's. Mark's words were interrupted by a voice from behind. My what? I turned around and saw my father-in-law standing there. I thought you went home, I said. I had a feeling something wasn't right, Sarah, so I parked the car and followed you. Looks like I was right. Seeing his dad there, Mark knew his lies weren't going to work. He looked nervous. My father-in-law asked sternly, Who is this woman? Well. Before Mark could say anything, the woman spoke up. I'm Amy, Mark's girlfriend. Mark quickly covered her mouth. What are you saying? You need to be honest, Mark. You don't love your wife. Just divorce her already, she said boldly. What? No, just be quiet, Mark exclaimed. Why should I listen to you? You promised to leave your wife for me. That's why you chose me over her today, right? Amy accused. That's because you threatened me. You said, if you don't come to Alaska with me today, I'll tell everyone about us. Mark defended himself. I see, so you were having an affair with her? I said coldly. Amy glared at me and snapped back. It's not an affair. Mark and I are serious about each other. He never wanted to marry you. At that point, I didn't even want to argue anymore. Fine, do whatever you want. Leaving Mark and Amy behind, my father-in-law and I left the airport. It was 5 days later when Mark came back home. The doorbell rang, and I talked to him through the intercom. Sarah, can you open the door? I can't unlock it. Oh, I changed the locks. You changed them? Why would you do that without telling me? I don't want someone I don't know having a spare key to our home. Someone I don't know? Are you talking about me? Who else would I be talking about? I got the divorce papers ready, so just sign them. Wait, let me in first. We can talk about this. I kept the door chain on and passed the divorce papers through the crack. There's nothing to talk about. Once you sign these papers, can you leave right away? Don't be so angry. I've decided to end things with Amy. Huh? What do you mean? She's awful. I only agreed to go to Alaska because she threatened to tell everyone about us. But the trip was terrible. She complained the whole time about the inn and the weather. I told her I won't divorce you. Please break up with me. I don't care if you break up with that girl or not. The only option for me is a divorce, even if you don't agree. Don't say that. Are you mad because we didn't go to Italy? It's too late now, but do you want to go? Are you serious? How can you even suggest that? I was wrong to think I could reason with you. A man who cancels our honeymoon to go on a trip with his mistress isn't reasonable. Sign the divorce papers now and also sign this. I handed him another document through the crack. What's this? He asked. It's a payment agreement for alimony and the cancellation fee for our honeymoon. I had a lawyer prepare it while you were away. I'm saying I don't want a divorce. You're the one who wants it, so why do I have to pay alimony? I want to try again. You can't ignore the consequences of cheating. Infidelity means alimony, and the decision to start over isn't yours, considering you cheated. What about this cancellation fee? We don't get a refund for canceling our trip last minute. Since you caused it, you should pay. I told you to go alone. Not going was your choice. How could I go alone on our honeymoon? And you lied about your dad being sick to cover up your affair. I couldn't go in that situation. I wanted to go to Italy with you, but Amy threatened me. You wouldn't want me to lose my job, would you? Amy threatened to expose you at work. Yeah, exactly. If she says she'll do something, she'll do it. It's all Amy's fault. Amy did give off a vibe of unpredictability. I mean, she even boldly declared herself as Mark's girlfriend directly to his wife. She must be quite bold. But strangely, I felt relieved. With someone like Amy in the picture, Mark's actions would eventually catch up with him, even without my interference. All I needed now was to get him to sign those divorce papers. Pretending to be concerned, I asked, "Hey, are you sure it's safe for you to be here?" "What do you mean? You ended things with Amy, right? Isn't she angry?" "Of course she's angry, but I'm done with her." "Well, maybe you're fine, but what about Amy? Knowing her, she might show up at your office and cause trouble." "True, that would be a disaster. I need to go to the office and handle this. Sarah, could you pass me my company key card?" "This one." I pulled out Mark's company key card and showed it to him. "Yeah, that's it." I quickly moved away from the door as Mark reached for the card through the gap. "I'll give you the key card if you sign the divorce papers and the payment agreement first." "But, have you made up your mind? You better decide quickly. Amy might get to your office before you." "All right." Mark reluctantly signed the documents and passed them through the door gap. "There, is that enough? Now give me the key card." I handed him the key card, and Mark hurried off to the office. I went to the courthouse to submit the divorce papers and gave the signed payment agreement to my lawyer. It was a relief to have the financial matters settled. The next day, Mark called me in a panic. "Hello? Sarah. What do you want? We're legally strangers now. There's nothing to talk about." "Wait, please don't hang up," Mark pleaded desperately. Curious about what happened, I decided to hear him out. "So what is it?" "I was called into a meeting by the board when I got to the office today. Everyone knows about my affair, even though I tried to get ahead of Amy. Isn't that strange?" "Oh, I told them." "You told the board?" "Yeah, I felt bad because they came to our wedding. But we divorced so quickly. Since you were busy with Amy, I thought I should explain why we split up." "Just the board? You told everyone at my office?" "Yeah. When I told them my husband chose a vacation with someone else over our honeymoon, they were shocked." "But how can I face everyone at work now?" "You don't have to hide anymore. Isn't that a good thing? Don't play games with me. You've ruined everything." "I should be saying that to you. I wish I could get back the 5 years I wasted on someone like you." When I spoke up, he fell silent. "Why don't you just be with Amy? If she cares about you so much, wouldn't she support you even if you quit your job?" "No, being with her only brings trouble. The only one who can support me is you, Sarah." "Well, being with you only brings me trouble. If you want support, maybe you should think about how your actions affect others." "Yeah, I regret it. So can we try again?" "No chance. Maybe it's time for you to reflect, start fresh, and try dating again. Oh, and maybe find a job first." "Sarah, please don't leave me. You're the one who betrayed me first. You'll have to live with your regret." I ended the call abruptly. After that, Mark went back to his parents' house a few times to borrow money. But my father-in-law, who was falsely made out to be seriously ill and used as an excuse for Mark's affair, was furious. Eventually, he cut ties with Mark. Mark started feeling uncomfortable at work and ended up quitting. Job hunting didn't go well, and now he's barely making ends meet by working part-time at a convenience store. On the other hand, I moved into a new home with the alimony from Mark. Even though I changed the locks, it still felt strange living in a place my ex-husband knew about. Mark's parents helped me move. Maybe they saw it as a way to make up for their son's mistakes. I still keep in touch with them and have meals together occasionally. I may not get back the 5 years I spent with Mark, but I'm determined to find someone better next time. I'm a 35-year-old office worker. My husband, Kevin, is 6 years older than me, and we've been married for 9 years. Right now, I'm living with my mom for some reasons. Let me explain how this happened. 4 years ago, Kevin and I built a house. At that time, Kevin had just changed jobs and we didn't have much money saved or a high income. Kevin used to work for a big company, but his boss constantly bullied him secretly. This caused Kevin to have trouble sleeping and eventually he couldn't go to work anymore. He saw a psychiatrist and took a 3-month break, but when he didn't get better, he quit his job. After that, we lived on just my salary. Kevin didn't work for 3 months, but slowly started to feel better. He began eating and sleeping well again, and his psychiatrist was happy with his quick recovery. My cheerful, loving Kevin was back. He then started looking for a new job. His experience at the big company helped, but finding a job was hard because he left his last job due to mental health issues. During this time, we found a small company that needed Kevin. The salary was about 3/4 of what he used to make, but he was happy to be working again. He said it was much better than being without a job, which made me happy. This job was also in a field he wanted to work in. We wanted to have children, but it was clear that life would be tough if I stopped working. So I continued working. I also loved my job, and we decided not to have children at that time. Our life was peaceful until my mother, Sarah, was paralyzed in a car accident and needed a wheelchair to get around. My dad had passed away when I was in middle school, and Sarah had been living alone since then. Our family home was old and not suitable for a wheelchair, with many steps. Kevin then said, "I'm worried. Let's live together." Sarah and I were surprised, but I appreciated Kevin's unexpected kindness. Since Kevin had just changed jobs, we were unsure about the future, but we decided to apply for a mortgage. As we expected, it was tough to get a loan because Kevin hadn't been at his job for long. However, we were determined and didn't give up. After trying with several mortgage companies, we finally found one that worked with us and approved our loan. We bought our dream home, which I had always imagined, filled with the smell of wood, thick wooden beams on the ceiling, custom storage spaces, a kitchen tailored for my height, and spacious cypress flooring. Importantly, it was a single-story, barrier-free house, perfect for living comfortably in a wheelchair. We were excited as our house was being built and visited the construction site every day. When our carefully designed home was finished, it had a large yard where my mom, who now rarely went outside, could enjoy sunbathing. However, there was a catch with the land. It was given to us by Kevin's grandfather, who adored Kevin. Kevin's family wasn't wealthy, but when his grandfather was diagnosed with cancer, he started to distribute his assets, giving us the largest plot of land. It felt like winning the lottery, but the land was just a 10-minute walk from Kevin's family home. When we told them my mother would be moving in with us, Kevin's sister laughed and said, "Why is your mother moving in too? How shameless is your family?" Kevin's mother told me that marrying someone different like me would bring trouble. She also harshly said it was terrible for her son to have to care for an old person and called me a curse. Even then, Kevin stood up for my mother and me. He said the land was a gift from his grandfather, and no one should complain. Kevin's mother and sister are really mean. It's amazing that Kevin, who is so kind, comes from that family. He's like a beautiful flower that grew out of mud. Kevin always says his family shows him how not to be. Kevin thinks his grandfather gave us the land because he wanted us to take care of his mother in her old age. He also gave other properties away. Kevin's sister got a parking lot that's a 10-minute walk from their home. It's smaller than our land but makes good money from parking fees. Honestly, I would have preferred that, but a gift is still a gift, and we are thankful. Thanks to my grandfather-in-law, we could build our house without paying for the land and used it to help get a loan. When the house was finished, we invited Kevin's mother and his sister's family over. The builders told us they had visited the house several times without asking us. They showed up late without apologizing and said, "This is kind of like Grandpa's house, so it's like our house too." Kevin's sister came in with muddy shoes and said the house smelled nice and didn't need air fresheners. She and her husband walked around with muddy shoes, ignoring the slippers we offered. When I suggested they use slippers, she laughed and said it was too much trouble and that we could just clean the floor. The visit was uncomfortable from the start, and they didn't bring anything with them. When they saw my mother's room, which is spacious and sunny, Kevin's mother said she would like that room. My mother's room is like a duplex with its own kitchen, almost a second living space. "I want to live here," said my mother-in-law. She then told my mother, "You were lucky to have that accident, weren't you? Thanks to being paralyzed, you moved from that old shack to this nice house. Isn't that a lucky turn of events?" My mother said nothing but looked very sad. I was really angry inside, but before I could say anything, Kevin spoke up. What did you just say? There are things you should and shouldn't say. It makes me question your humanity. I can't even believe you're part of my family. You're the worst. Apologize now, Kevin demanded firmly. Whether they were amused or not, my mother and sister-in-law glared at me. Then my sister-in-law angrily asked Kevin, "What's this all about?" It's a total turnoff. It's not cool to invite people over and then be rude to them. Just because you built a house, you think you can act superior. The mother-in-law chimed in. My son messed up by marrying you. You're a jinx. Kevin didn't stay silent. Enough is enough. This mess started because of your rude comments. You said the accident was a good thing and called my wife a jinx. I will not forgive that. The mother and sister-in-law looked frustrated by Kevin's strong response. Then my mother, who had been watching everything, said with regret, "It's okay. I am here because of the accident, and it's true I moved from a rundown house to this beautiful one. Your son has always been kind to me. Thank you." Perhaps feeling guilty, the mother and sister-in-law left, giving me a nasty look. My mother then apologized to Kevin. "I'm sorry if I upset your mother and sister. I'm sorry for ruining the mood at our housewarming party." Kevin responded, "No, I should be the one apologizing. It's embarrassing how they lack decency. I'm really sorry, but I am happy to be living with you. Please understand that." With that, my mother started to tear up. Since we live near Kevin's parents' house, the neighbors all know us well. They've known Kevin since he was a child and are very kind to us. 4 months have passed since that day. We were finally settling into our new home, and my mother started to smile more when I received an unexpected call from home while I was at work. We rarely get calls from home, so it surprised me. My bad feeling was right. My mom, sounding very upset, called to tell me something awful. Kevin had collapsed at work. I was shocked and spoke to my boss right away, then rushed to the hospital. On the way, I tried to stay calm by imagining that Kevin would be okay when I got there, joking around like always. But when I arrived, it was a shock to see him with so many tubes attached to him. We had planned to go to a movie that weekend. The doctor told me Kevin was in critical condition and might not wake up. I felt like I was in a movie. I couldn't even cry. Despite my prayers, Kevin passed away at the hospital. My shock continued as my mother and sister-in-law arrived when they heard Kevin had died. My sister-in-law accused me harshly, asking if I had poisoned him or if I was after his life insurance. My mother-in-law also blamed me, saying bad things always happen around me and calling me a jinx. I was too sad to respond. Then my own mother arrived in a care driver's taxi, crying over Kevin's death, which finally made me cry too. We both sobbed loudly. My mother-in-law rudely told us to stop the fake crying. She said Kevin had changed because of me and that she didn't want to see us ever again. Then she left the hospital. A funeral director came to organize Kevin's funeral, and we went to the funeral home. Kevin had died from a brain hemorrhage, which was hard to believe since he was fine that morning. When I told my mother-in-law the funeral plans, she coldly said she wouldn't come because Kevin always sided with my mother and me. She said her daughter wouldn't come either. Many of Kevin's coworkers and friends came to the viewing, but neither my mother-in-law nor my sister-in-law and her husband were there. Many attended the funeral, and it was clear that Kevin was deeply loved. Many people cried for him. It was hard, but maybe this is just the kind of people his family were. I was happy to spend the whole day with those who truly missed my husband. After Kevin's death, I got an email from my mother-in-law, but it was inappropriate, so I didn't reply. She was asking about the life insurance money and kept emailing because I didn't respond. Eventually, she claimed she had a right to it. I chose to ignore it because I wasn't ready to deal with that. When we got home, I noticed a light on inside, which was odd. My mother, Sarah, was confused and thought we had turned off all the lights. I figured maybe I forgot because I was so upset. I told her it was understandable given the situation, and I unlocked the door. When we entered, we could hear the TV, which was very strange. Inside, we found my sister-in-law and her husband sitting there. I was so shocked I couldn't even speak. The living room was full of unfamiliar furniture and boxes. We had no idea what was happening. My sister-in-law said, "Why did you just barge in here?" "Well, it's your first time, so I'll let it slide. We're taking this house. We sold your stuff, so leave." My mother and I were completely shocked. I asked where our furniture and belongings had gone, and she casually said a resale company came and took everything. claiming we had good furniture and they got a good price for it. They bought new furniture with that money, saying, "Who wants furniture that a dead person used? It's bad luck." She added that she cared about such things and our stuff was packed in boxes. She even remarked that we must be minimalists or just poor because we had so few things. The furniture was carefully chosen by my husband and me. I couldn't forgive them for this. My mom was furious too, her face turning beet red, but she was too shocked to respond. I immediately called the resale company. After explaining the situation, they agreed to treat the items as stolen and return them. Now that my husband is gone, dealing with this was the last thing I needed. I don't want anything to do with his family, but I do want to stay in the house that's full of memories of him. While I was wrestling with these feelings, my mother quietly said to me, "What do you think Kevin would say if he were here now?" "He might say we should leave. I'm sure he would." Kevin often mentioned it's good to spend time with people who understand you, but there are some people who will never understand no matter how much you try. It's a waste of time dealing with those people. He was actually talking about his own mother and sister. I realized that if we stayed, his family would keep interfering. Acting on impulse, I signed a lease for an accessible apartment. My mom was surprised by how quickly I made that decision. I asked the resale company to hold on to the furniture for a few days, and it was moved to our new apartment 3 days later. In exchange for moving out, I made my mother-in-law and sister-in-law promise to cut ties with us. So a new life began for just my mother and me in the apartment. It turns out Kevin had many life insurance policies, almost obsessively so. He used to joke always with a smile, "When I die, you guys will be rich." True to his word, he left enough money for my mother and me to be comfortable for the rest of our lives. Since he couldn't secure a mortgage when we bought the house, I, being employed at a major corporation, bought the house in my name. I made sure that even if something happened to Kevin first, I wasn't going to keep paying a mortgage for a house I wouldn't live in. According to our agreement, the house would be auctioned off if the mortgage wasn't paid for 4 months. Time flew by, and 4 months passed quickly. Then I started receiving a lot of calls from my sister-in-law, Emily, and my mother-in-law, Maria. My call history was filled with their names, and it was getting scary, like something out of a horror movie. They were incredibly persistent. So I finally answered the phone. They were furious because the house was being sold. Apparently, when they tried to return, they found out they couldn't get in because of a seizure notice. Emily and her husband had moved out of their apartment since Kevin passed away, and Emily had also quit her job. I suggested they move back into their parents' house since they were panicking about suddenly being homeless. Surprisingly, Maria had gotten so caught up in gambling that she couldn't keep up and had sold her own house. It turns out they had been living together for the past 5 months. I also heard that they sold their main source of income, a parking lot in front of the train station, a long time ago. Now, Maria and Emily's family are completely homeless. When Maria said, "I'm sorry for everything. Let's get along. Can you lend me some money, please?" I replied, "I think it's best if you stay away since I'm a jinx. We're strangers now that we've severed ties." Maria was quiet after mumbling weakly. In my mind, I was thinking, who's the real bad luck charm here? Then when I said I wouldn't lend them a single cent, Emily, who had been listening next to Maria, shouted, "You devil. Bring us the money right now." I replied, "I am a devil and bad luck, so I'm going to hang up now," and ended the call. In reality, I involved a lawyer for the past 5 months to push for the auction of the house. I thought it was an unusual case, but apparently, it's not that uncommon. The house was sold without any major issues, giving our family a moment of peace. We plan to find a new home with the money Kevin left us. Since it's just my mother and me, we don't need a big house. We'd rather prioritize security as 2 women living together. So I chose a condominium with minimal noise disturbance. I remember something my husband always said when we built our home. People can get energy from the sun, so let's create a place where your mother can enjoy her hobby of reading in the garden without feeling self-conscious. With those words, he had made a spacious courtyard for her. So I looked for a condo with a large balcony where she could enjoy her coffee and read. It's smaller than our previous home, but the room is spacious enough to house the furniture my husband probably chose. The piece of land that was gifted to us by Kevin's grandfather was expansive, and the house sold for more than expected. With that money, we're moving forward. I recently bought a luxurious condominium with exceptional security features, a choice I'm sure would have comforted my always cautious husband, Kevin. The peace of mind that comes from living in such a secure place is invaluable, especially after the tumultuous experiences with my in-laws. Life has taken a dramatic turn since Kevin passed away. Amidst my grief, I've been dealing with the fallout from his family's actions, which frankly has been draining. Following the auction of the house, Kevin's mother, Maria, and his sister found themselves without a place to live. Despite their desperate attempts, including trying to borrow money from neighbors, they couldn't secure any financial assistance and ended up in public housing. Living in public housing, they continued their old habits, causing disturbances that have started to concern the community. For instance, they recently had a barbecue on their small balcony, an act that left many locals in disbelief given the limited space and safety concerns. Such thoughtlessness seems typical of them and reflects the disregard they've always shown for others' comfort. Moreover, their financial difficulties appear to have led to frequent loud arguments that disrupt the nightly peace, an auditory testament to their ongoing strife. My sister-in-law's husband has since left, leaving just her and Maria to fend for themselves. Their situation is a stark contrast to the quiet, stable life I now lead with my mother. We're both two-person households, but while my home is a sanctuary, theirs is a source of constant conflict and unease. It's become so disruptive that neighbors are banding together, hoping to evict them to restore some semblance of peace. It's a harsh reminder that no matter where you go, being a nuisance can make you unwelcome. Reflecting on these events, I realize how the phrase, "what goes around comes around," rings true. My goal is to live quietly and peacefully, distanced from the embarrassing turmoil associated with my former family. I believe Kevin watches over us, perhaps with mixed feelings about the chaos his family continues to perpetuate in contrast to the tranquility he loved during his life. As I move forward, my focus is on living a life that causes no trouble to others. I want to honor Kevin's memory not just through words but through actions. He always advocated for a life well lived, surrounded by people who bring joy and understanding. Despite the unfortunate family dynamics he left behind, I'm committed to building a life filled with positivity and peace. The decision to buy this condominium wasn't just about finding a new home. It was about creating a haven where my mother and I could feel safe and secure. The quiet, the order, and the absence of drama allow us to enjoy each other's company and focus on the things that truly matter. It's smaller than our previous house, but every corner of this new space is cherished, every moment of silence savored. I've learned a lot about resilience and moving forward. The memories of Kevin, filled with love and laughter, inspire me every day. They remind me of the importance of living authentically and compassionately, ensuring that his spirit of kindness is carried forward. Living well is perhaps the best tribute I can offer to a man who gave so much and asked for so little in return. In this new chapter, amidst the serenity of our chosen sanctuary, I am determined to live not just for myself, but in a way that would make Kevin proud. I won a trip to the Caribbean in a contest, but my husband Andrew threatened to divorce me if I didn't let him and his mom go instead. He used the trip as leverage to get his way. His mom seemed pleased with his plan. I couldn't let them get away with it. I'm determined to get back at them. My name's Lillian, and I'm 32 years old. I work a regular job and have a son named Andrew. I didn't really date much in college and didn't think much about romance until later. When I turned 30, my parents, worried about me, helped me find someone to marry. Andrew seemed like a good match. He cared a lot about his family, which was important to me too. We got married, and everyone was happy for us. It felt like a dream come true. About 6 months into our marriage, I got a bunch of calls from Andrew. He sounded really tired when I called him back. He told me his dad, Alfred, had collapsed at home and was rushed to the hospital. It was shocking news because Alfred had always been healthy. After Alfred passed away, Andrew became very attentive to his mom, who was now alone. He'd visit her every day, take her out for dinner or shopping, and even took time off work to go on a trip with her. It's not like he ignored me, but whenever there was a conflict in our plans, he'd choose to be with her. He'd say things like, "Sorry, Lillian, Mom needs me," or "We planned this with Mom a while ago." I'd agree, but deep down, I felt frustrated. Why was I always the one having to compromise? Wasn't Andrew's mom being a bit too demanding? No matter why Andrew is so attentive to his mom, it's clear he's really close to her. Apart from this issue, our marriage was fine. I just figured this was normal. My personal escape? Doing crossword puzzles with prizes. They were perfect for when Andrew was busy with his mom. Sometimes I'd even win gift cards or food. One day, I won a big prize, 2 tickets to the Caribbean. I was so excited, I checked the win multiple times. But before contacting the airline, I had to decide who to take. My first thought was Andrew, but I hesitated. He often traveled with his mom, and I didn't want her to come along if I suggested we go together. After thinking it over, I decided to give the trip to my parents. On my way home, I stopped by my parents' place to share the exciting news. "Mom, guess what? I won tickets to the Caribbean," I exclaimed. Mom's eyes widened with delight. "Wow, that's fantastic. You and Andrew must be thrilled." I hesitated for a moment before replying, "Actually, I want you and Dad to have them." Mom was taken aback. "For us, are you sure?" she asked, pleasantly surprised. "Absolutely. Andrew travels a lot already. I want you two to enjoy this opportunity," I explained. Mom was beaming with joy, but Dad seemed worried. "Dad looks concerned," I noticed. "Well, I have work, dear. It's a busy time of year for our company, so it's not ideal for me to be away," Dad explained. "That's too bad," I sighed. Then Dad had an idea. "Why not go with Olivia instead? It was your prize originally, right? Go and have some quality time with her," he suggested. Mom eagerly agreed, saying, "That sounds wonderful." Feeling excited and grateful, I applied for leave the next day, which was quickly approved. I then contacted the airline to let them know my parents would be using the tickets. On my way home from work, I stopped by a bookstore and bought a guidebook for the Caribbean trip. It had been ages since Mom and I had traveled together, and I was genuinely thrilled. But when I got home, something unexpected awaited me. "I'm home," I announced as I walked in. Surprised to see the lights on, I assumed Andrew was there. But instead of his shoes, I spotted a familiar pair of women's shoes at the entrance. As I wondered, Matilda emerged from the living room. "Lillian, do you know what time it is?" she scolded. "Oh, Matilda, I didn't realize you were here," I replied. "It's not just about me being here. It's late and Andrew will be back soon," she continued. "I'm sorry, I'll make dinner right away," I apologized. But Matilda didn't stop there. She criticized me for not making the bed and questioned if I took my role as a daughter-in-law seriously. Matilda sighed, blaming my working for the situation. According to her, I should prioritize home over work. She had a key to our place and often dropped by unexpectedly since she lived nearby. Matilda held old-fashioned beliefs about a daughter-in-law's role, expecting me to serve Andrew and the family without question. Her constant criticism made it hard for me to warm up to her. As I unpacked and began making dinner, Matilda suddenly exclaimed, "Wait, what's this, Lillian? Are you planning a trip to the Caribbean?" She had found the guidebook I had just bought. "Matilda, why are you going through my stuff?" I asked, annoyed. "That's not the point. Why are you going to the Caribbean?" she demanded. "I won a trip in a contest. I was going to give it to Mom," I explained. "I haven't heard anything about this. Why should I?" Matilda snapped back. Our argument was interrupted by Andrew's arrival. Matilda quickly told him what she found, pointing at me accusingly. "Andrew, listen. Lillian's being thoughtless." "Did she do something wrong?" she asked. Andrew turned to me, his expression stern. "What's going on?" he demanded. "I won the trip and wanted to give it to my parents. But since Dad can't go, you're going with Mom." I replied calmly. "Why didn't you talk to me about this? It's my prize," Andrew said, looking frustrated. "What's the big deal? You always travel with Matilda," I retorted. "It's not the same. Mom and I only go on trips within the country. We haven't been abroad in years. How could you decide this without talking to me?" Andrew slammed his hand on the table, cutting me off. "You're getting too bold for a daughter-in-law. Mom and I are going. You stay home." "Mommy," I couldn't hide my disdain at Andrew's childish word choice. "Wait a minute. This trip, you've had enough. If you're not happy, let's talk about divorce." Divorce? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Threatening divorce over something like this seemed absurd to me. Fuming, I shot back. I won this trip fair and square. I've already decided to give it to my own mom. Can't you just pick up on the signals for once? Mom wants to go. When does it end with putting Matilda first? You never think about how I feel. I don't care how you feel. Like I said, this trip is for me and Mommy. Stay home and behave, Andrew insisted coldly. My affection for Andrew was quickly fading. It was clear I ranked lower than Matilda in his eyes. I couldn't keep dealing with the ridiculous dynamic, so I calmly told Andrew, "Fine, do what you want and enjoy your trip." You should have listened in the first place. Do what you want, Andrew replied dismissively, a far cry from the caring Andrew I once knew. Meanwhile, Matilda looked smug and victorious. I decided to leave the house while they were away on their trip. I resolved to let Andrew and Matilda have their vacation this time. The next day, I called the airline to change the names on the tickets to Andrew and his mom. But the operator sounded worried as they told me, "I'm sorry, but once the participants are confirmed, we can't change them." "Is that so?" I asked, feeling disappointed. "Yes. Plus, this ticket requires the actual winner to be one of the travelers. So if it's your husband and mother-in-law, the ticket won't work," the operator explained. "So, if I don't go, the ticket is useless," I clarified. "Exactly. Please check the documents we sent you. They mention this condition," they advised. After reviewing the documents, I found out that only the winner could use the ticket, and it couldn't be transferred. I explained this to the operator and decided not to go on a trip without telling Andrew and Matilda. Instead, I made plans to let them travel at their own expense. That evening, when I got back from work, I casually brought up the Caribbean trip to Andrew. "Hey, about the trip?" I started. "Yeah? Did you talk to the airline? Are Mommy and I all set to go?" Andrew asked eagerly. "I did call them. Here are the winning documents and the tickets. I only need the tickets. I won't bother reading the documents," I replied. "But there might be important details in there, especially since it's an international trip," Andrew suggested. "I don't think I need to. Mommy and I have got it covered. We're efficient, unlike you," I retorted. "Fine, whatever. I'll leave them here just in case," Andrew said, sounding annoyed. As I expected, Andrew didn't bother to read the documents. On the day of the trip, after making sure Andrew had left, I packed my bags and went to my parents' house. While unpacking, as I anticipated, I got a call from Andrew. As soon as I picked up, he started shouting. "Hey, what's going on?" "They're saying the ticket can't be used," he exclaimed. "That's right. If the winner doesn't go, the ticket is invalid," I explained calmly. "What? Why didn't you tell me this earlier?" Andrew demanded. "I did tell you, remember? I mentioned it might be a good idea to read the instructions," I reminded him. "You mean it was written in those documents you gave me?" Andrew asked, sounding frustrated. "Exactly. It's your fault for not reading." "This is ridiculous. So how are we supposed to get to the Caribbean?" Andrew asked, his tone getting more agitated. "Well, the operator did mention that if the winner doesn't go, you'd have to pay the full price," I replied matter-of-factly. Clearly caught off guard by the situation, Andrew sounded frantic. I could hear Matilda's voice in the background, indicating they were both in distress. "Andrew, what did Lillian say?" Matilda demanded. "Mommy, if Lillian doesn't have to pay for the trip." Andrew started to explain before handing the phone to Matilda. "Let me talk to her. I can't deal with this anymore," she demanded. I decided to let them sort it out themselves and hung up silently. It didn't take long before Andrew called back. "Hello," I answered, expecting more drama. "What is it now?" "I'm busy," I said coldly. "It's not. What is it?" Andrew sounded flustered. "I tried to buy the tickets, but the credit card isn't working," he explained. "Huh? I don't know anything about your card," I replied, puzzled. "It's not mine. It's your card," Andrew clarified. "Oh, so you're saying you used my card without my permission?" I accused. "I just need to fix it now. When I checked my wallet this morning, my card was missing." "I had a hunch and immediately froze it. I knew you stole it," Andrew retorted. "Are you kidding me? I was planning to shop with that card abroad." "Always messing things up, you jerk," I fired back. "You freaking witch," Andrew snapped. He showed no remorse for taking the trip or for using my card without permission. This guy always put himself first. Fed up with his behavior, I coldly told him off. "A jerk? Who were you calling that after mocking others all the time? You should just go to hell," I exclaimed. "What? Who are you talking to like that?" Andrew asked, sounding offended. "Who do you think? Calling out for Mommy is honestly creepy. If you love Mommy so much, why don't you two just stay together? I can't handle you, a mama's boy." "There's no value in us being married," I declared. "Hey, calm down. If you keep this up, we'll divorce," Andrew threatened. "Fine by me." I was thinking the same thing. "I've left the house and don't plan to come back. Enjoy your time abroad with your beloved mommy. Hope you both drown in the Caribbean." I shot back before hanging up, feeling both angry and relieved. Furious, I ended the calls and blocked Andrew and his mother. Then, I went to a law firm my dad suggested and started the process of ending my marriage. When I looked at our savings to divide our assets, I saw that our joint account was empty. Andrew had taken out money multiple times, all around the time he went on a trip with his mom. It was clear he used the money for their travels. And he also used my credit card without asking. I demanded a big payment from him. As a result, he ended up owing money and was being chased by creditors. His mom, who used to get whatever she wanted, now had a strained relationship with Andrew, arguing with him every time they saw each other. It's funny how things turned out considering how spoiled he used to be. Meanwhile, I decided to stay with my parents for a while. I've caused them worry, so I want to make it up to them by living with them and taking care of them. Honestly, I'm done with marriage. What's really important is having a loving family. Going through this divorce made me realize that all over again. My name is Emma, and I'm a 20-year-old university student living in New York. My family has gone through a lot of changes. My parents got divorced when I was 14, and since then, I've lived with my mom. Things got even harder last year when my dad, who I was very close to, passed away from cancer. He left me a lot of money in his will, but I could only get it when I turned 20. This year, I finally reached that age, and then something surprising happened. One afternoon, my stepdad Justin, who is in his mid-30s and has been married to my mom for the last 6 years, asked to talk to me. Our relationship has always been a bit tense. I try to keep things peaceful, but he's not always been nice to me. He started the conversation with a serious topic. He suggested that I give the money my dad left me to my stepbrother, Michael, to help with his college expenses. According to Justin, Michael needed the money more for his education, and he thought it was only fair that I help out. I was shocked by his request. The idea of giving away the money my dad left for me felt wrong. I tried to explain to Justin that this inheritance was something my dad wanted me to have for my future, but Justin didn't agree. He insisted that I didn't need the money and that Michael's needs were more important. Despite his pressure, I stood my ground. I calmly explained to Justin that my decision wasn't about disrespect. It was about honoring my dad's wishes and keeping my personal boundaries. Justin got very upset and tried to intimidate me, but I remained firm in my decision. It was a tough conversation, but it was important for me to stand up for what I felt was right. I told him clearly that if he was upset by my refusal, he might want to rethink his approach. "Justin, remember you're part of this household too, so let's try to keep things respectful," I suggested, but it didn't seem like we would reach a peaceful resolution. I ended the conversation and left before he could respond. Justin's reaction didn't surprise me given his past behavior. I had a feeling he might try to get the inheritance money for himself at some point. You might wonder about my mom's role in all of this. Well, that's complicated. My mom, for reasons I don't fully understand, always overlooks Justin's bad traits. She's deeply in love with him, almost to the point of being blind to his flaws. And I didn't want to ruin her happiness by constantly clashing with Justin. So I've tried to keep the peace for her sake. It's odd that even though I'm one of the youngest in the house, I often have to be the most responsible. At the time of this ordeal, my mom, Mary, was out of town, which is why she wasn't around to intervene. Had she been there, she would have been furious. Justin knew he had a window of opportunity with her away, underestimating my resolve in the process. As I walked away from our heated discussion, Justin followed, berating me and calling me a terrible sister for not wanting to give the inheritance to Michael. But it wasn't about not wanting to help, it was about the principle. Justin and Michael unfortunately seemed to follow the like father, like some trope, acting more like schemers from a cartoon than family members. Their antics reminded me of the characters Pinky and the Brain, with their roles in this scenario up for debate. As I tried to leave the argument behind, Justin wasn't done. He insisted I listen and comply with his demands, bringing Michael into the conversation to reinforce his point. Michael sleepily joined in, confused about the details until Justin prompted him about the supposed important reason behind their demand for the money, a supposed business venture that suddenly became about Michael's university tuition. Their story was inconsistent, with Justin scrambling to justify their claim to my inheritance, first mentioning a business, then switching to tuition. It was clear their motives were murky at best, relying on manipulation rather than any real need or right to the money my dad left me. I just woke up, so I'm a bit foggy, Michael mumbled, trying to piece together his story. Right, the university. I've been thinking about going, and I need the money for that, so yeah, I need it. His attempt to claim the inheritance for his education wasn't very convincing. I couldn't help but firmly say no, which sparked protests from both him and Justin. Why not, Emma? He's clear about what he wants, Justin pressed, insisting that they deserve the money. We'll just have to see about that, I replied, feeling the tension in the air. Justin's usual antics were harmless, but this new scheme to manipulate me out of my inheritance showed a selfish and immature side of him. I decided not to tell my mom right away, wanting to deal with the situation myself, especially after learning more about their questionable intentions. Emma, stop being childish. It's time to act like an adult and do what's right. Justin lectured, suggesting that giving away my inheritance was the mature thing to do. His reasoning didn't make much sense to me. And what, Justin? The right thing is to give away my inheritance just because you say so, I argued. His insistence on keeping this from my mom made me even more suspicious. Why shouldn't I tell her? She deserves to know what's going on in her own house. Justin's urgency to keep my mom out of it, along with his unusually stern attitude, made me even more determined. Something wasn't adding up, especially with the supposed business venture Michael mentioned earlier. It was clear they underestimated my awareness of their tactics, and Justin's resistance to involving my mom raised a big red flag. At the first chance I got, I decided to talk to my mom. Hey Mom, how's everything going? I started, trying to gauge her mood. I'm doing okay, dear. What about you? She replied. I hesitated, knowing what I was about to say might cause some trouble. Not so good, Mom. There's something going on with Justin and Michael. Justin especially. He's been acting really weird. My mom tried to calm me down, telling me not to worry too much. Oh, Emma, don't let your mind run wild. But it was too late to stop my suspicions. Everything seemed to point to something more than just a misunderstanding or me being paranoid. Even though my mom was hesitant to believe anything bad about Justin, I kept going, determined to make her see what was really going on. Mom, I understand you have feelings for him, but Justin went too far. He didn't just ask for the inheritance money. He demanded it for Michael, saying it was for education. There's something not right about all this, and he even got aggressive when I mentioned telling you. I explained, my determination growing despite her doubts. My mom hesitated, torn between her emotions and the troubling accusations against the man she cared about. I'm having a hard time believing this, Emma. I think we need more proof to understand what's going on. Don't worry, Mom. I'll find the evidence we need, I reassured her. Even though she wasn't fully convinced, I couldn't shake the feeling that Justin had somehow manipulated her. But I knew I needed solid proof to expose his true intentions. That night, I searched the family computer for any clues about Justin's behavior. Luck was on my side when I found his email account open. What I discovered was shocking. Emails between Justin and a woman named Martha revealed a web of deceit. These messages hinted strongly at an affair. But what caught my attention was their discussions about plans for divorce and a future together, fueled by money from a shady business venture. While Justin was careful not to mention anything illegal, his betrayal was clear. Armed with this information and determined to learn more, I decided to talk to Michael, hoping he might accidentally reveal more about their plans. I started a casual conversation with him, secretly recording our exchange on my phone. Hey Michael, I greeted him, pretending to be cheerful. Hi, Emma, he replied, sounding happy. You seem in a good mood today. Why not? It's a beautiful day, I said, steering the conversation to find out more about Justin's plans and how they were affecting my family. I approached Michael with curiosity, pretending to consider their request for the inheritance money. I've been thinking about what you and Justin said. I'm actually thinking about giving you the money for your college, I told him, watching his reaction carefully. Really? That's great. I'll tell him right away, Michael said, sounding excited. Wait, not so fast. Before we do anything, I need to be sure of something. This money is strictly for your college fees, right? I asked, trying to see if he was being honest. Yes, definitely for my college tuition. Michael stuttered a bit, sounding a bit unsure. And you're certain about that? What about Martha? Is she involved in this too? I pressed, mentioning the name I had found in Justin's emails. Martha? Who's Martha? Michael stumbled, confusion evident on his face. Oh, she's a student advisor at the college, he quickly improvised, but it didn't quite ring true. Unbeknownst to us, Justin had entered the room silently, his presence intimidating. I don't appreciate you interrogating my son like this, he interjected, his tone stern. I was just asking about where the money is going. If I'm considering giving it away, I want to make sure it's being used properly, I explained, trying to stay calm. Justin's response was sharp. Once you give money away, it's no longer your concern. It's not up to you anymore. The audacity of his statement stunned me, especially when he followed it up with a threat. You're not just thinking about giving us the money, you will give it to us, or you'll find yourself out of this house. Michael looked just as shocked as I felt by his father's sudden escalation. Dad, this isn't what we talked about, he started, but Justin cut him off, asserting his authority and threatening to kick me out if I didn't do as he said. I chose to stay silent, retreating to my room while recording the entire confrontation. Justin had no idea that his true colors were being recorded. Once I was safe in my room, I gathered all the evidence I had against him. It felt like I was a detective in one of those crime shows, piecing together the puzzle. I had audio recordings and email screenshots, all pointing to Justin's deceitful behavior and his affair with Martha. Feeling the weight of my findings, I knew it was time to involve my mom. Mom, are you sitting down? I have something important to tell you, and it's not easy, I said, preparing her for what I was about to reveal. Breaking the news to my mom was difficult. I started by telling her about the unsettling discoveries I had made. At first, she found it hard to believe, but when I played the audio recording of my conversation with Justin, her denial started to fade, replaced by a mix of shock and heartbreak. Why would he do such things? Why be so cruel? She asked, her voice breaking with every word. It's difficult to accept, but we're dealing with someone who doesn't have our best interests at heart. I replied gently, trying to offer support despite the harsh truth. I hate to say it, but he's not the person we thought he was. Hearing the truth from the recording was a turning point for my mom. This is unacceptable. I can't believe I wasn't here to protect you from them, she said, her initial shock turning into determination. Stay where you are. I'm coming back right away. And yes, I've locked my door, I reassured her. My mom's protective instincts kicked in. She was ready to confront Justin and make sure he regretted his actions. He's going to realize he made a big mistake messing with our family, she said, her voice filled with determination. When she arrived, it was a moment of mixed emotions. We hugged tightly, sharing tears over the betrayal and the tough decisions ahead. But there was also a sense of relief and unity. Together, we spent hours planning, ready to face the situation as a team. In the days that followed, Justin was puzzled by my mom's sudden return and her cold attitude towards him. He tried to act cheerful, probably hoping to charm his way out of any trouble. But my mom saw right through him. She wasn't swayed by his act and was preparing to take action. Concerned about the true nature of Justin's business and the potential misuse of the inheritance, my mom decided to bring in professional help. She hired a private investigator to dig deeper into Justin's activities and the mysterious emails. The thought of him planning to misuse the money for unethical purposes made her furious, and she was determined to protect us from his deceit. The private investigator's findings confirmed our worst fears and shed new light on Justin's schemes. My mom filled me in on the details, and together we prepared for the next steps. It was clear that this was more than just a family dispute. It was about standing up against manipulation and ensuring justice was served. The atmosphere in the room was tense, a mix of disbelief and determination hanging between us. Justin's usual confidence seemed to waver under the weight of our accusations, his eyes darting around as if searching for a way out of our confrontation. You don't know what you're talking about. This is absurd, Justin tried to deflect, but his voice lacked its usual assertiveness. It was evident that the tables had turned and the power he once held was slipping away. Caught in the middle of this familial turmoil, Michael looked from his father to us, his expression a mix of confusion and realization. Perhaps for the first time, he began to see his father for who he truly was, a revelation that seemed to shake him to his core. My mom, with a determined look fixed on Justin, stepped forward. Not only do we understand, but we have proof. Emails, recordings. You've been planning to launder money through a laundromat, and you've involved yourself with a known criminal. Martha's record speaks volumes, and your plans for this business are crystal clear. Justin's attempts to maintain innocence were crumbling fast. You have no idea what you're getting into. This is my business, my life. You can't just barge in and. But we can and we are, I interjected, supporting my mom's stance. This isn't just about your business, Justin. This is about our lives, our safety. You've brought danger and illegality into our home, and we won't stand by and watch you destroy everything for your own selfish gains. The evidence was undeniable. The audio recordings of Justin's and Michael's conversations, the emails outlining their plans, and now their own admissions made it impossible for Justin to deny any longer. The camera in my hands, still rolling, captured every word, ensuring there was no way out for him. You think you're clever, recording this, gathering evidence? Justin sneered, his composure cracking further. You may think you've won, but we don't think we've won, Justin. We know we have. My mom cut him off, her voice strong and unwavering. What you've done is not only morally wrong but also illegal. You've endangered this family, exploited my trust, and now you're going to face the consequences. As the confrontation reached its peak, Michael finally spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. Dad, how could you? It was a question heavy with betrayal and disillusionment, aimed at the man he had once looked up to. The room fell silent, the weight of the situation settling in. Justin, stripped of his usual confidence, seemed to shrink before us. It was clear the charade was over. My mom's next steps were evident. Legal action, separation, and ensuring the safety and security of our family. As we left Justin to grapple with the consequences of his actions, my mom and I knew the road ahead would be tough. But armed with the truth and evidence, we were ready to face whatever came next together. The veil of deceit had been lifted, revealing a newfound strength and unity between us, ready to rebuild and move forward. I don't know what you're implying. Why don't we call Martha? Maybe she can clarify things. Justin attempted to deflect, his panic thinly veiled. You think you have it all figured out. Martha is just a friend, he added. But his confidence was rapidly fading. The compromising picture we found tells a different story. I countered, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. And seriously, who uses email for affairs these days? It's incredibly reckless. Justin, visibly flustered, retorted, You went through my personal stuff? That's outrageous. No, Justin, what's outrageous is you, my mom interjected, her voice filled with indignation. How dare you threaten my daughter over money that rightfully belongs to her? How dare you try to evict her from her own home? Your actions are indefensible. How dare you involve your son in your reckless plans, putting him at risk? And your audacity to plan illegal ventures with that money is unforgivable. Now, when it's time to face the consequences, you suddenly fall silent. She continued, her words sharp and slicing through the tension in the air. Justin, feeling cornered and desperate, snapped, Get that camera out of my face. As he lunged towards me in a blind rage, I swiftly dodged his attempt, his aggression only emphasizing the seriousness of his unraveling. Are you really about to attack my daughter? Do you understand the trouble you're in? My mom exclaimed, her voice a mix of shock and fury. Justin, defiant until the end, sneered, You think you know what's going on? You know nothing. Well, let's see if the police agree with you. They should be here any minute now, I declared, watching closely for his reaction. Police? You wouldn't dare, he blustered, but his confidence faltered as the sound of police sirens grew closer. Justin's usual arrogance faded, replaced by pure terror. It was the first time I'd seen him stripped of his bravado, revealing the coward underneath. Please, Mary, let's not make this worse. I can explain, he pleaded, his voice cracking under the pressure. Save your explanations for the judge, you disgraceful man, my mom retorted with a disgust that left no room for doubt. And Michael, don't think you're off the hook. You'll face the consequences too. As the police arrived, it was evident that this marked the beginning of the end for Justin's schemes. My mom's powerful statement reverberated in the air, signaling a crucial moment of justice for us. This should be a lesson to you about disrespecting my daughter and me. You're old enough to know right from wrong, and it's time for you to face the consequences. Yes, Mom, I understand, Michael replied, acknowledging that he had crossed the line and needed to accept the consequences. Come on, Grace, isn't this a bit extreme? Justin attempted to argue, hoping for leniency. On the contrary, this is just the beginning of what's deserved, my mom countered, her determination unwavering. Emma, how's our live stream going? She asked, adding a modern twist to ensure that justice was visible to all. We have over 5,000 viewers tuning in. This is making an impact, I informed her, amazed at the digital audience we had attracted. And just to be perfectly clear, my mom addressed Justin directly, her voice firm and steady. I want a divorce. Yes, you heard it right, she declared, ensuring the live stream captured every word. The fallout from the live stream was immense. The drama unfolded in real time for over 5,000 witnesses, and the story quickly spread to local newspapers and tabloids. Being at the center of this whirlwind was surreal, witnessing the swift downfall of Justin, my soon-to-be ex-stepfather, and the complicit Michael. The satisfaction of seeing justice served was palpable. Justin's world crumbled as he lost his job, friends, and even the support of some family members who chose to distance themselves. Facing serious charges, his future hung in the balance, with the possibility of spending up to 20 years behind bars if found guilty. Meanwhile, Martha, his partner in crime, was also discovered by the police, facing similar charges and an uncertain future. Throughout the turmoil, my mom and I found strength in each other. Our bond deepened as we navigated through the chaos, emerging stronger on the other side. Weekends became our time to relax on the patio, drinks in hand, reflecting on the absurdity and cruelty of Justin's actions. It was a period of healing and reaffirmation for both of us. Good riddance, we toasted, sharing a sense of relief and closure. Good riddance indeed. Look, I'm letting you off the hook this time. Just come back, and I'll pretend I didn't see anything. What is this guy talking about? He doesn't get it. Time to show him some hard truths. My name is Olivia, and I'm 32. I've been married to my husband Mason for a year now. We met at a friend's party, hit it off, started dating, and eventually got married. We're not getting any younger after all. Mason isn't the most exciting guy, but he's calm and steady. I thought we'd be together until we were old. We both work, so we don't have to worry about money. We got married without overthinking it. I do most of the housework since we're both busy with our jobs. Mason never helps. He's either relaxing or leaving early, rarely home. But I never found housework a burden. My parents lived like this too, and I thought this was how a wife's life should be. I have a regular 9-to-5 job and no major hobbies. Mason and I were never very talkative. We respected each other's space, and it was never a problem. Life just went on. One night, Mason came home late, probably from drinking with coworkers or friends, who knows. I welcomed him. Mason, you're home late. Had a long night out, huh? Dinner's still there if you want it, but I guess you're not eating this late, are you? He turned around, said nothing, and walked into the living room, ignoring me. I sighed. Here we go again. Whenever Mason is in a bad mood, he gets very quiet, so I figured something at work or during his night out must have upset him. Best to let him be. I know better than to bother him when he's like this. I felt his presence from the living room but shrugged it off and went to bed. He'd probably be back to his cheerful self by morning. It was the same old story, and I didn't give it a second thought. The next morning, while I was preparing breakfast, Mason came into the kitchen. Good morning, I greeted him cheerfully. Mason glanced at me, grabbed some milk from the fridge, and left without a word. I was a bit surprised by his coldness. It wasn't like him. He still seemed to be in a bad mood. I never thought I'd see the day when he would act like this. We both valued our independence and space. I hadn't tried to talk to Mason directly, so I decided to wait and see. I continued preparing lunch boxes for both Mason and myself. However, things didn't go back to normal that easily. Mason remained distant the following night and the day after. At this point, I was genuinely concerned. Days turned into weeks, and Mason continued to give me the silent treatment. I tried reaching out through WhatsApp and even left him notes, but he ignored it all. However, he'd eat the meals I prepared. I noticed the empty lunchbox in the sink, so I knew he ate the packed lunch. So I put a note in a cooler bag. I thought if he found a note while enjoying a lunch I made with love, he'd have to react. But that was another miss. Mason said nothing. Before I knew it, Over a month had passed in this strange silence. I felt helpless. I had tried everything, but nothing worked. Then, one evening, I took a drastic step. I deliberately didn't prepare dinner. Every evening, I made dinner when I got home. But what if I didn't? How would Mason, who's been ignoring me, react? I decided to find out. When Mason came home, I pretended to be watching TV in the living room. Mason came into the living room and looked intently at the table where dinner usually waited. But tonight, the table was empty. After looking at the barren table, Mason turned his gaze to me. Holding my breath, I waited for him to say something, but he walked into the living room in complete silence. I heard the front door open and shut with a bang. I was stunned. Why am I being ignored like this? I had no idea. I was left bewildered, sitting alone on the living room couch. The next morning, I woke up and went to the living room. Mason was already gone. Did he go to work already? Curious, I looked on the living room table and found a note. Reading the words on it, my eyes went wide. "Stop skipping out on your wifely duties," it read, scribbled hastily in messy handwriting. Something inside me snapped. That's it. I'm done. Why do I have to keep pleasing Mason? Is this going to be my life forever? We were never a clingy couple, but this is just unacceptable. There's no reason for him to do this, nor an opportunity for me to even ask about it. For the last month, the stifling silence in the house has been unbearable. I wrote next to Mason's scribble, "I'm going back to my parents' house." I quickly packed up my things and went home. My sudden arrival surprised my parents, but after I explained how Mason had been ignoring me for over a month without any apparent reason, they understood and welcomed me warmly. It felt good to be in an environment where I could have a normal conversation. For now, I decided to stay here and see how Mason reacts before deciding on my next steps. I didn't hear from Mason the day I left. Knowing him, he's probably assuming I'm just trying to make a point and will continue to ignore me. Well, let's see how long this lasts. Days turned into weeks, and there was still no call or message from Mason via WhatsApp or any other means. He didn't even bother to visit my parents' house. Before I knew it, half a year had passed. I had nearly forgotten about Mason altogether. Then one day, as I was leaving my parents' house to go shopping, there he was. Mason, standing with a defiant and angry expression. I was shocked and froze in my tracks. Mason just glared at me, still not saying a word. Is this game still going on? It was almost laughable how silent Mason was. But then, in the next moment, he tried to walk into my parents' house without saying a word. Whoa, hold on there. I stopped him. Mason looked at me, his face a mix of anger and disbelief, but still silent. I warned, don't just walk in. I will call the police. Finally, after more than 6 months, Mason spoke, a snide smile on his lips. Look at you, acting all high and mighty. Since when do you get like this? Just because you're at your parents' house doesn't mean you can talk to me like that. I remembered Mason being a bit rough around the edges, but not like this. Lost in thought, I was jolted back to reality when Mason suddenly erupted. What were you thinking? Leaving the house for half a year, having a good time at your parents'? Get a grip. Mason kept ranting, then gestured as if to say, I can't believe this. Look, I'll cut you some slack this time, okay? Just come home. I'm willing to overlook it this once. Mason spoke so condescendingly. I calmly responded, I think you're confused. You and I are strangers now, you know? Mason's face went blank, then turned red with rage. He started yelling again. What are you saying? Have you lost your mind? We're married, aren't we? Stop playing games. His intense outburst silenced me for a moment. He kept yelling, I'm saying I'll forgive you this time, so stop messing around and pack your bags. At that moment, my own anger boiled over. He talked like he was doing me a favor by forgiving me, as if I'd done something wrong. That infuriated me even more. Moreover, it seemed Mason had no clue what had happened in the last 6 months. Finally, I snapped at Mason, who was still yelling. I received divorce papers from your mother, signed them, and already filed them with the court. So we're not married anymore. Got it? We're strangers. Total strangers. Understand? I emphasized the word strangers, and Mason looked at me, his face drained of color. He seemed genuinely shocked. Here's what happened, I continued. A month after I moved back to my parents' home, your mother, Helen, called me to a cafe near our house. We had never been close, and I hadn't seen her for a while. After brief pleasantries, she handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked, tilting my head. "Open it. Even you will understand," she said. I opened the envelope and pulled out the paper inside. It was a divorce petition, already signed and stamped by you. Confused, I looked at Helen. The eyes of your mother, who was glaring at me, were the same as yours, full of disdain. While putting the divorce petition back into the envelope, I asked her, "So, is this Mason's doing? Did he say anything to you about this?" Helen let out an exaggerated sigh before answering. "Oh yes, he said plenty. Would you like to hear?" I smiled at her and replied, "Yes, please go ahead." She launched into her story. According to her, Mason had been bad-mouthing me for a while now, saying that I was a useless and incompetent wife who stopped doing any housework after we got married, that I quit my job and lazed around at home all day, and that whenever something didn't go my way, I would run back to my parents and act like a spoiled child. Helen's eyes never left mine as she spoke, and it was clear she believed every word of Mason's lies. There was no point in arguing with her, I thought. When she was done talking, Helen finally asked, "So what are you going to do? Not that I want to meddle, but you're being pretty awful, you know." By the time I walked out of that cafe, my mind was made up. I smiled and told her, if he wants a divorce, then that's what he'll get. Helen glared at me one last time, slapped some money on the table for her share, and walked out of the cafe. I went straight to my parents' house, signed the divorce papers, and submitted them to the court the very next day. While I was explaining all of this, Mason's face turned increasingly pale. It seemed he hadn't been informed by Helen at all. But honestly, I didn't care. After all, I had already trusted Helen with the signed divorce papers. Mason must have had the same idea in mind, I figured. Once I finished telling my side, Mason blurted out in a panic, "No, you've got it all wrong. I only filled out those divorce papers to keep my mom off my back. I never intended to submit them. They're invalid." Panicked or just confused, he started making no sense. "Besides, you're the one who will suffer if we divorce. So let's go to the court right now and have them withdrawn." I gave Mason a cold stare, then tilted my head. Why would it be a problem for me if we got divorced? Mason suddenly grinned as if he had won. "Think about your age. At your age with a divorced history, no one will want you. That's why I'm saying I'll take you back. This is for your benefit. You get it? I'm saying we can pretend the divorce never happened and you should be happy," Mason said, his arrogance and delusional thinking palpable. I couldn't help but roll my eyes. "Listen, we're not kids. A divorce doesn't just get erased. And for the record, I'm already married to someone else." Mason's jaw dropped and he went silent. "What? Really? Do you want me to repeat myself? I'm married to someone else." Mason, who had a look of disbelief, suddenly started making a fuss. "That's a lie. You're just trying to look good, aren't you? You're making up stories to get me to go away, aren't you? You're really making a fool out of me. You know that such lies won't work." As I was wondering how to explain to this idiot, a presence came from behind me, and a man appeared at the entrance. The man looked at me and Mason alternately, looking confused. Mason, for his part, was surprised to see a stranger coming out of my parents' home and fell silent. When I looked at the man, he tilted his head and asked, "Is something wrong?" Feeling awkward, I smiled and turned to Mason. "This is my husband, Noah." Noah greeted Mason with a slight, skeptical nod. Mason took a step back and looked up at Noah. It made sense. Noah was a former national rugby player with an imposing physique. Overwhelmed by Noah's appearance, Mason suddenly started to make excuses. No, you've got it all wrong. My old boss told me you've been married for about a year now, and your wife might start to get a little uncomfortable. Better put her in her place," he said. So I did, and guess what? Turns out he got dumped by his wife and kids. What a fool, right? I was just doing what he told me to do. I never wanted to do any of that stuff. You understand, right, Olivia? I looked at Mason with a gaze filled with disgust, fed up with his pathetic excuses. Mason looked puzzled, maybe because my reaction wasn't what he expected. Then Noah spoke up. "Sorry, but could you leave immediately and never come back here? If you approach Olivia again, I'll call the police." As he said this, Noah firmly pushed Mason out of the doorway. Intimidated by Noah's force and determination, Mason fled the scene. For a while, we both remained wary, concerned that Mason might harbor a grudge and do something irrational. But days turned into weeks, and we never heard from him again. One day, curiosity got the best of me, and I reached out to a mutual friend to inquire about Mason. We began by catching up on casual topics, but when I asked about Mason, our friend sighed and filled me in. Surprisingly, Mason quit his job just a few days after showing up at your parents' house. The reason? Turns out Mason was always in agreement with his boss, whom he trusted when the boss harassed subordinates at work. It became a big issue in the company. As a result, the boss was resigned. Resigned being a euphemism, he was basically demoted to some remote mountainous area I'd never heard of. Apparently, Mason was expected to be transferred as well, but he quit out of pride. According to our friend, he's still jobless. He's been looking for work, but his arrogance has hindered his efforts. Even when recruiters offer him opportunities, he declines interviews. Furthermore, news of him quitting reached his mother, who then disowned him due to her own extreme personality. Finally, our friend said he blames everything on his old manager and just drowns his sorrows every day. At this rate, he'll ruin his health before he ever finds another job. It's a mess. I hope he finds a new spouse or something, though that's unlikely. We both chuckled as we hung up the phone. Mason seemed to be drowning his days in job hunting and drinking. Thanks to him, I am now living a peaceful life with Noah. Interestingly, Noah was actually my colleague. Upon hearing about my divorce, he had eagerly pursued me. Though we started dating only 6 months after my divorce, which made me somewhat hesitant, I was quickly drawn to his confident manner and kind personality. After getting married, Noah told me that he had always had a crush on me and he was heartbroken when I got married. I laughed and apologized for not noticing his feelings sooner. Noah helps me around the house, a task I used to handle alone. Whenever we eat together, he always says how delicious the food is with a smile. It's these little things that make me incredibly happy, something I never expected. I was probably numb to it all, having grown up with old-fashioned parents. Now I am living a sparkling married life with Noah, who always delights in even the most ordinary things. I'm convinced that with him, I'll have a happy life all the way through our golden years. And so I am certain. Effie, my mother-in-law, told me that if I didn't go on the trip she planned, I wouldn't be considered part of the family anymore because I married her son, Cody. She wanted Cody to agree with her. I stopped Cody from saying anything and agreed to go on the trip to avoid conflict. Effie said marrying someone like me, who she thought was inexperienced, was a hassle. She warned that if I didn't come, she would consider divorcing Cody and would teach me things her way. I was fed up with her rude comments. Little did I know, this trip would be the last one with my in-laws. My name is Liliana, and I'm 32 years old. I own a small app development company, which I really enjoy. My husband, Cody, is 37, and he works at a bank. We both love our jobs and often talk about them for hours. Cody understands and supports my work, and we share household chores. Even though we've been married for 4 years, we don't have children yet because we're focused on our careers. But we both like kids and hope to have some in the future. My family owns an auto parts factory that my dad started, and now my brother runs it. They've been very supportive of my dream to start my own company, even though our businesses are different. I often seek advice from my dad and brother, who are also business owners. They've always been there for me, so my family is a big support in my life. Cody's family owns a small factory, and since he was their only child, they expected him to take over one day. But Cody had different plans. The factory wasn't doing well, and his dad, Andy, was thinking about closing it down. Running a small factory is tough these days. When Cody was young, he often overheard his dad talking to bankers on the phone. He even met a friendly banker during a visit to the factory and started going to the bank with his dad just to see him. That's how he got interested in banking. Cody worked hard to make his dream of becoming a banker come true, and now he works at a big bank. Even though everything might seem okay between Cody and me, our marriage isn't going well. Cody's mom, Effie, doesn't think highly of my job. I can work from home sometimes because my job allows it, but Effie sees it as a pointless job and doesn't understand it at all. I get it. It's hard for our parents' generation to understand jobs like mine. Even though my job isn't physically demanding, it's still tiring. I always adjust my work schedule around Cody's family's plans so I don't bother them. I don't expect them to get it, but it's frustrating when they think working from home is easy just because my schedule is flexible. Effie disapproves of other things about us too. When we got married, we built our own house between our parents' homes. It takes less than 30 minutes to get to either house. We both work and manage our money separately. We like having our own space and privacy, even as a couple. We each contribute a set amount of money for household expenses every month and save the rest for our future. But Effie doesn't like this lifestyle either. She thinks it's wrong for a couple to keep things private. According to her, family members shouldn't have secrets, and she doesn't think we're a real family because of it. Effie seems to have a problem with me, probably because she really likes her son Cody, and I'm just in her way. Whenever we see each other, she makes mean comments about us not having kids yet. It's a sensitive topic for me, and I'd rather not talk about it. Normally, people avoid bringing up things like that, but Effie keeps mentioning it every time we meet. So, to avoid upsetting Cody, I've been staying late at work on purpose to miss seeing her. Effie has done other surprising things too, but one thing she did really upset me. It was on the day of my best friend's wedding. After the wedding, my friend was moving far away, so we wouldn't see each other as much because of our jobs. I was really excited to celebrate her special day, but a week before the wedding, Andy asked me to go to an important business event. I said no. The only thing more important to me than my friend's wedding would be if a parent was really sick. But that night, something unexpected happened. When I got home from work, my in-laws were at our house. As soon as she saw me, Effie got really mad. "Liliana, what's wrong with you? Saying no to Andy's request is rude. You're married to my son, so you should put family first. Your refusal is not okay. You need to think about what's important," she yelled at me. Cody was there too, but he didn't say anything. After finding out that the reception Andy asked me to attend was crucial for the future of the company, I understood the seriousness of the situation. But to me, my best friend's wedding was just as important. I explained to Effie, "I get what you're saying, but my best friend's wedding means a lot to me and I don't want to miss it. Plus, I don't even work for Andy's company." Even Cody joined in, saying, "Can't you make an exception this time? This is really important for the company's survival." "I'm going to, and it's a family effort. We can make it up to you for missing the wedding. It's a family crisis. Can't you help us?" I was shocked to hear Cody say that. He knew how excited I was about the wedding. Then Andy added, "I understand Liliana's perspective, but this time we really need your help." The atmosphere made it hard for me to refuse. It wasn't just any reception. In the end, I reluctantly agreed to skip my best friend's wedding. I told my friend the truth and explained why I couldn't come. Thankfully, since I had talked to my best friend about my family situation before, she understood. In fact, she was more worried about me. I'm lucky to have such a caring friend. I felt really bad about missing my friend's wedding. But once I made the decision, I had to focus on making the reception a success. On the day of the event, Cody and I got to the venue early and tried to reach Effie, but she didn't pick up her phone for some reason. I started to worry about what to do, but finally, the in-laws showed up just 10 minutes before the reception was supposed to start. I was surprised to see them looking so messy, with untidy hair and wrinkled clothes. I was shocked and asked Effie, "What happened? Why do you look like this? Today's reception is important, isn't it?" She awkwardly replied, "I overslept, Liliana. Just make sure you behave yourself." I was really tempted to snap back with, "I don't need advice from you," but somehow, I managed to keep my cool. I have to give myself credit for staying calm during the reception. Effie, not great at talking politely, made a bunch of rude comments to our guests. She probably thought they were jokes, but their uncomfortable smiles showed they didn't find them funny. As I expected, we didn't get the contract we were hoping for, and the reception was a flop. I couldn't help but think I should have gone to my best friend's wedding instead. I was really angry that I got dragged into such a disaster, messing up my plans and causing problems with the in-laws. What made it worse was that they didn't admit they did anything wrong. They acted like it was the guests' fault for not sealing the deal after such a fancy reception. They said it was a good thing we didn't make a deal with such odd people. I couldn't believe how clueless they were. After that mess, I felt even more uncomfortable around my in-laws and started avoiding them. But there's one thing I can't get out of. Cody's family has this tradition of going on a family trip every year since he was a kid, and they still do it even though we're married now. Since we got married, I've been expected to join these trips, but I always end up doing all the boring stuff: driving, booking hotels, researching places to visit. If I try to say anything about it, I'm shut down with a don't push it. Even when we visit tourist spots, I often end up staying in a hotel room, missing out on places I'd like to see. Honestly, I really don't look forward to these yearly family trips and secretly hope I might get sick and avoid them. But now, it's time for this year's trip, and despite saying they're short on money, my in-laws insist on a fancy trip like always. They put me in charge of finding a hotel. I planned everything carefully to keep Effie happy since she's always grumbling. Since I don't drink, I'm always the one who ends up driving. But I don't mind because it means I don't have to listen to their conversations. But just before the trip, a crisis hit. I got a call saying my mom had collapsed and was in bad shape. With that news, going on the trip, even for a short while, wasn't an option. I panicked, knowing I needed to see my mom right away. Since it was the day before the trip, I decided to cancel and get ready to go to the hospital. Cody offered to come with me to the hospital, but I said no. It felt like he was suggesting my mom might not make it, and I didn't want to hear that. When Cody and I told Effie we couldn't go on the trip, she got really mad. Effie's words hit me like a ton of bricks. You're saying you can't go on a trip I planned? If you don't come, you're no longer family. As my son's wife, it's common sense to prioritize the family trip, right? Right, Cody, she said, expecting Cody to agree. Cody seemed like he wanted to say something, but Effie cut him off, making it clear she didn't want to hear any objections. I was so shocked that I couldn't even respond. Being with my mom in her critical condition was the only thing on my mind. Just as I was trying to figure out what to say, my brother called. He told me that mom's condition was serious but somewhat stable. I wanted to rush to her side, but he explained that due to a contagious disease outbreak, visiting wasn't possible right now. He said we could arrange a short visit later as she gets better. So there was no urgent need for me to go. Hearing this news left me feeling torn about what to do. Seeing my hesitation, my brother asked what was going on. I explained everything about the trip and my dilemma. My brother, a little annoyed, suggested something helpful that I hadn't thought of in the midst of my distress. The trip was going to a place near my parents' house, which my brother assured me would be easy to reach from a hotel if necessary. He was right. Whether I stayed at home or in the hotel, I could quickly get to my family if needed. Taking my brother's advice, I reluctantly told Effie, "Okay, I'll come on the trip." Effie responded, "Well, if you'd said that earlier, I wouldn't have gotten so upset. Marrying someone so inexperienced is tough. Just remember, if you don't come, it's divorce. I might have to teach you a few things." Cody seemed surprised, but we agreed to go, with the condition that I could leave for the hospital if necessary. Effie commented, "It'd be a problem if our driver disappeared suddenly, wouldn't it? Good, you're part of the family now, so our needs come first. Remember your role as my son's wife. This trip is a big deal. It should be your priority." Her smug attitude and obvious excitement annoyed me, but I decided to put up with it to avoid more trouble. On the day of the trip, I was so worried about my mom that I couldn't stop checking my phone. Meanwhile, Effie was already drinking beer in the morning. As I drove, the back seat of my car turned into a party scene, with Cody surprising me by joining in the drinking. Even though it was unexpected, I reminded myself that everyone had rearranged their schedules for this trip. I thought it would be nice if everyone could enjoy themselves since we all made an effort to be here. During the trip, Effie's demands were constant, urgently needing bathroom stops or wanting to stop for more alcohol. I felt like I was being treated as a servant, but I decided to endure it. Then my phone rang. It was my brother, thankfully informing me that Mom had survived. Her condition had stabilized and she had regained consciousness. The diagnosis was a subarachnoid hemorrhage. However, I couldn't fully relax yet. There were worries about potential aftereffects. It was comforting to have my brother keeping me updated as I was feeling anxious. When I shared the news of Mom's recovery with my in-laws, Effie dismissed it, saying, "If she's better, there's no need to bother us with such news. You're making a big deal out of nothing." Andy agreed, saying, "Exactly. Let's not spoil our trip with such grim news. We're here to have fun." I was disgusted that Andy shared Effie's view and didn't want to think of these people as my family. During the trip, they made a lot of noise in the hotel, drinking and partying, which was embarrassing. This incident deepened my distrust of my in-laws. Thankfully, Mom's condition remained stable, and there was no need to rush to the hospital, allowing us to finish the trip and return home. I felt relieved. While I was doing laundry at home, Effie showed up unexpectedly. She asked to use our dryer because they didn't have one. I was annoyed and told her, "There's a laundromat with dryers. I have my own laundry to do, and I'm using it right now, so it's not possible." But she insisted, saying, "You're always so stingy. Once you're done, it's fine. I'll come pick it up tomorrow. Have it ready by then," and tried to leave her laundry in our washroom. Cody stepped in, saying, "Liliana is tired and has work tomorrow. It's not possible for her to help with the laundry. Let's go to a laundromat." Effie got angry, feeling like her son was taking my side. She left in a hurry, leaving the laundry behind and hurling insults as she slammed the door. Looking back, maybe if things had been different that day, the outcome might have changed. Later, Effie returned and said something unexpected. She told me, "During the trip, I noticed something, Liliana. You seem unaware of being married to Cody. We might face similar situations in the future. Since we couldn't talk about it, I've decided that Liliana should make a decision." Then she placed a family contract and divorce papers on the table. I was speechless. What on earth was a family contract? It seemed ridiculous and confirmed my belief that she couldn't have a normal conversation. But Cody surprised me with his response. He said, "I have something to say. If you keep forcing your opinions on us, I'll cut ties. I can't deal with this anymore." "What do you think, Liliana? You're not a servant or housekeeper. You're not the one who's mistaken about your position." Effie was stunned. Up until now, Cody rarely spoke up against her. It wasn't because he agreed with her, but because he wanted to avoid conflict. After Cody spoke, Effie's anger turned towards me. "You've changed Cody since you married him. He used to be so sweet. It's crazy for him to talk to me like that." "You must have brainwashed him, turn him back into the old Cody," she accused, confronting me. She believed I had manipulated Cody into defying her. Then, Cody defended me even more. "You're the one doing the brainwashing here. You always fly off the handle without listening to anyone's opinions. Honestly, you're a toxic parent. You never let me live my own life after I got married. Instead of calming down, you're attacking Liliana. Enough is enough. I'm not going to divorce, and if you have a problem, you should stay out of our lives," he firmly stated. Effie turned to Andy, who was there, and burst into tears. Andy responded, "If that's what Cody thinks, then so be it. We'll cut ties. Do as you wish," and left in a huff. I was surprised but relieved that Cody stood up for us like that. Feeling frustrated, I confided in my brother about everything. He became furious and said he couldn't stay silent if they were behaving this way. He decided to take action, which ultimately led to a tragedy in the in-laws' family. It turned out that my brother's company was a client of my in-laws' company. We had kept our family's company name a secret to avoid creating a power imbalance. The in-laws had no idea they were dealing with my family's company, but with things as they were, we couldn't continue like this. Although I had been patient and avoided mixing business and personal matters, it had reached its limit. My brother had been having issues with them not meeting deadlines. "You can't cherish those who don't cherish you." I discussed it with Cody before talking to the in-laws, and he agreed. Cody also said he had had enough. My brother decided to end the contract with my in-laws' company purely as a business decision. Their company had become problematic, consistently failing to pay on time and missing deadlines. Despite these issues, we had tolerated it because of the family connection. But now there was no reason to continue. When my in-laws learned about this, they came to us in tears, constantly apologizing. They begged my brother to reconsider the contract, but it was out of the question. Their failure to meet deadlines was their own responsibility, and they should have appreciated our patience. Cody explained everything to his parents, but they refused to accept it and ultimately cut ties in anger. Cody wasn't upset. He felt relieved. He had been torn and exhausted, caught between us and his family. Since then, we've been living peacefully. I discovered that Cody had been financially supporting his family, but he stopped doing that now. Even before this incident, their family factory was struggling and was close to shutting down due to debts. I also found out that Cody had been paying for those yearly trips for his family. It's surprising how they could act that way, using someone else's money. Now, Cody's parents are living more modestly, and Effie has started working recently. It's quite unexpected to see her, who used to consider herself a president's wife, now working. One day, I witnessed Effie being reprimanded while doing a cleaning job. Although I initially felt it might be karma, I couldn't help but feel sorry for her. Perhaps through this experience, she'll learn about the realities of life and hopefully change for the better. As for us, work is going smoothly. We haven't had children yet, but we're content with our jobs and life feels fulfilling. We're planning a trip abroad for our next vacation. For now, we're enjoying life without the added responsibility of children. My mother-in-law yelled at me, saying I not only make our son do chores and take care of him, but now I'm trying to get our money too. She called me lazy and said I only bring in $700. I felt scared as she pointed a knife at me. It hurt my feelings a lot. I was doing all the work and looking after the kids because my husband didn't have a job. I couldn't take it anymore. I left everything and took my child to my parents' house. My name is Emily. I'm 23 years old and I live with my husband, our child, and my mother-in-law. My husband Richard was popular in high school. He was good at soccer and was the student president. Everyone admired him. He came back to our town after getting a job and asked me out. We started dating seriously after a few dates. Even as an adult, he was still the handsome, impressive guy I fell for. After I finished vocational school, I found out I was pregnant. It was a bit unexpected, but I thought I could have a happy life with my child and Richard. But things got tough when we talked about life after getting married. Why don't we move into my parents' house after we get married? Richard suggested. But I wanted to be just us three with our child, I replied. But won't it be expensive to live on our own? He asked. If we stay with my parents, we won't have to worry much about money. And if we both work, we can afford our own place, right? I reasoned. Well, about that, my income this month isn't great, Richard admitted. How bad is it? I asked. It's less than $1,000, he confessed. What? Why is it so low? You told me you were working at an IT company, I exclaimed. I quit that job. Now I'm making money at the casino and doing part-time work, he explained. At a casino? Why would you do that? I questioned. After just 1 month, he quit his job. If you're okay with paying for everything, we can live in an apartment, he said casually. His lack of enthusiasm made me worried. Was I the only one excited about our new life? Seeing my concern, he gripped my hands tightly. It's just temporary until I find a new job. I'll make you happy, Emily. I'll take care of all the chores and our child until then. Believing his promise, we got married and moved into his parents' house. After giving birth safely, I was determined to work hard for our son. Both Richard and my mother-in-law seemed happy, and I looked forward to our future together. But even after our son was born, Richard didn't help with chores or taking care of our child. Instead, he spent his days at the casino. After going to the casino again, what about helping with the chores and taking care of our child? I asked, reminding him of his promise. Don't tell me what to do, Richard suddenly shouted back at me. Confused by his outburst, my mother-in-law came into the room, having heard the argument. What's going on here? She asked. I'm busy with work, and she's asking me to help with chores and taking care of the child, Richard explained. What? That's the wife's job, my mother-in-law exclaimed. Richard hadn't told his mother about quitting his job. Instead, he painted me as the bad wife who forced him to do all the housework and take care of our child. His lies turned my mother-in-law against me, making her resentful. Richard kept going to his part-time job and the casino, where he often lost the little money he earned. I ended up paying most of our expenses, making our life tough since I wasn't working. Eventually, I had to go back to work, leaving our son at a child care center. Luckily, I found a job as a dental hygienist pretty quickly. But when I came home from work every day, my mother-in-law would yell at me. What do you think you're doing? This isn't playtime. You're a parent, but all you do is fool around. Make dinner now. She slammed the newspaper she was reading onto the floor in frustration. Sometimes she'd even break plates when she was really angry. My mother-in-law was unpredictable. Her mood could change in an instant. I was afraid of what she might do next, so I just went along with it. But between taking care of my son, working, and doing housework every day, I was exhausted. I couldn't take it anymore. So I decided to talk to Richard one more time. I caught him before he left for the casino early in the morning. Listen, I've reached my limit. Can't you help out with our son a little? What? Like I said, I'm busy. I'm trying to find a new job. You get that right. Do you want me to stay jobless forever? You'd be in trouble then, wouldn't you? Your child's father, unemployed. If you don't like it, just do what you're told, Richard retorted. But we're barely making ends meet. I'm using up all my savings to cover our food expenses. Do you even know how expensive diapers are? You say you're making money at the casino, but we never see any of it, I argued. Most of our living expenses were covered by my money. My mother-in-law used to pay for utilities, but now she wanted $500 a month from us. So I had to dip into my savings. Even the food costs were eating away at my savings, and I was running out of money fast. All I had left was what I earned from a part-time job I had while I was in school. That's enough. How dare you talk back to me? You've got a lot of nerve saying those things after moving into my house. Richard, who was usually kind, changed completely when it came to money or the casino. Hearing Richard shouting, my mother-in-law came into the room. What's going on now? Is your wife complaining again? She asked. Yeah, she is. She's telling me to do housework and take care of our child. And she wants me to help with the living expenses. Can you believe her audacity, Mother? Anyway, I'm off to work now, Richard said as he left. Once he was gone, my mother-in-law's expression turned sharp. You've got some nerve, expecting us to take care of your child and do the housework while demanding money from us. You should be ashamed. It's not like that. I'm not making demands. Life is just really tough without a little help. I tried to explain. You must be wasting money, aren't you? Careless with finances, my mother-in-law accused. She didn't understand the situation at all. She didn't know that her own son was unemployed and spending all his time at the casino. I was told to keep quiet, but I couldn't hold back anymore. Do you know that Richard isn't earning anything? He's unemployed because he quit his job. What are you saying? Richard has always been successful. Sure, he didn't pass his college entrance exams, but he got a job at a reputable company, my mother-in-law insisted. He quit that job after just a month. Now he's always at the casino. I can't manage on my savings alone. It's not fair. I pleaded. Don't talk nonsense. My mother-in-law refused to believe me. Her son, who had always been successful in sports and studies, was her pride and joy. She couldn't accept that he was now unemployed and wasting his time at the casino. Her face turned red with anger, and she stormed out of the room. When she returned, to my horror, she was holding a knife. What are you going to do? Please, stop. I stepped back, holding my son close. My mother-in-law advanced towards me, knife raised. I'm tired of your insults towards my son. Having a wife like you is ruining Richard. You're a lazy parasite living off a measly $700. Get out of this house. Her harsh words made me break into a cold sweat. I feared for my son's safety. Seeing my fear, my mother-in-law seemed satisfied and lowered the knife. Good, you understand. We don't want parasites like you here. Just stay quiet and do your chores, she said before leaving the room. Feeling the tension lift, I collapsed to the ground. My son started to cry, sensing something was wrong. I held him close, stroking his back, and made a decision. We couldn't stay in this house any longer. It was unbelievable that someone could threaten with a knife so casually she didn't even seem human. Until now, I had been swayed by Richard's sweet words. After every argument, I used to think I needed to support him, that he would fall apart without me. But I had reached my limit. Above all, I had to protect my crying son in my arms. I couldn't raise him in this house. I decided to leave the next day. In the morning, my stern-faced mother-in-law spoke to me. Emily, get ready for my husband's memorial service next week. All our relatives will be there, so everything must be perfect. Without waiting for my reply, she left for a neighbor's house. Next week was my father-in-law's memorial service. Richard and my mother-in-law had been planning a big feast and reminiscing about him. I was supposed to handle all the preparations, but I wasn't listening anymore. As soon as they left, I quickly packed our things and fled my in-laws' house. I didn't have much, just clothes, my son's toys, and diapers. When I got back to my parents' house, they were surprised. But when I told them everything, my mother cried and hugged me tightly. My usually calm father was very angry and told me to rest at home. Then that evening, the phone rang. It must have been Richard, wondering why I hadn't returned to make dinner. Ignoring the call and blocking his number was a good move to protect yourself and your son. The next day, mother-in-law and Richard showed up at your parents' house together, banging on the door early in the morning. Your parents tried to send them away, but you decided to let them in. As soon as you opened the door, they started shouting. How could you leave without a word? What kind of wife does that? It's strange to just disappear like that. Please, let's not shout. You're disturbing the neighbors, you said calmly, holding back the urge to point out who the real problem was. When they tried to grab you, your father stepped in. We'll call the police if you resort to violence. Let's talk inside first, with my parents present, he said firmly. Once inside, you initiated the conversation with mother-in-law and Richard. Why did you leave without saying anything? I was overwhelmed with childcare and my job, and yet you never helped, despite my pleas. Well, I was busy too. Busy at the casino, like I've already said. Our son doesn't go to the casino. Stop spreading lies. Richard insisted, while his mother seemed to still believe he was working. It seemed she thought highly of him and couldn't imagine otherwise. Mother-in-law, where do you think Richard is employed? You asked. At a securities company. I saw the job offer letter. After all, she replied confidently. Well, why don't we call them and find out if Richard is still there? That would settle it, you suggested. Oh, wait a minute. Richard stammered nervously. What's the problem? If you're working there, it shouldn't be an issue. That's, ignoring Richard's discomfort, you dialed the securities company on your phone and switched to speaker mode so everyone could hear. You asked if Richard was working there. That individual resigned several years ago, if memory serves me right. He was with us for just about a month, came the response from the other end of the line. The words from the phone left mother-in-law speechless. Richard was looking down, his fists clenched. Did you really quit? Why? She asked. Because it was frustrating. Everything was just grunt work, and the boss would yell at me for the smallest mistakes. It felt like harassment, Richard explained. Richard, why didn't you tell us what you've been doing since? You asked. I'm job hunting, he replied vaguely. How many years have you been job hunting? You don't seem to be getting any offers. Tell me, how many companies have you applied to so I can verify? You pressed. Well, there aren't any good job offers. When a good company comes along, I'll get a job, Richard said confidently. You seem very confident in yourself. By the way, you're working part-time now, right? How much did you make last month? You questioned. 700, Richard admitted reluctantly. 700? Didn't you tell me that Emily could only earn 700 and couldn't support herself? So you were the one supporting her? You questioned, realizing that Richard had misled his mother about your income. In reality, as a dental hygienist, you earned at least $2,000. Mother-in-law, now knowing the truth, blushed furiously as she glared at Richard. In response, Richard became extremely angry. Why do you have to do this? This is all your fault, making me look like a fool, he exclaimed, clearly hurt and embarrassed. He hit the table hard. You shouldn't reveal things like this in public. It's defamation. If you want to sue, go ahead, but I'll sue you for threatening me with a knife too. Besides, lawsuits aren't free. Do you have the money? You countered, standing up for yourself and refusing to be intimidated. At that, Richard clicked his tongue, likely realizing he had spent all his earnings from the casino. As mother-in-law was in shock after learning the truth about Richard's unemployment, I decided to lay it all out for her. I've been the one earning all our living expenses. When we got married, Richard promised to take care of the housework and childcare instead of me working. But after we got married, he didn't do any of it. That's different from what you heard, I explained. It seemed mother-in-law had simply believed whatever Richard told her, right? She had gotten upset when I asked for help with the chores and childcare. She even pointed a knife at me and told me to keep quiet and do my housework. I could see her face turning pale as she stood in front of my parents, being called out for her behavior. Mother-in-law, you haven't contributed anything to the household either. We've been living off my income this whole time. I have no intention of continuing to work for you, so I want a divorce, I stated firmly. Divorce? Wait a minute. Don't just drop that bombshell all of a sudden, Richard protested. Yes, that's right. I'll help out too, so please come back, my father added, offering support. No thank you, I stated firmly. Their surprised expressions indicated they were taken aback. I, who had always given in after being yelled at or begged persistently, had clearly refused this time. I don't want to live with someone who threatens me with a knife just to get their way. I'm tired of living with Richard, who spends all day gambling at the casino. I'll make sure you pay me compensation for all the hard work I've put in so far, as well as child support, I declared. No way. That's going to be a problem. I can't possibly afford that, Richard protested. Well then, stop gambling and start paying, I retorted. But I can't do that. I don't have a job, Richard admitted. I was appalled by Richard's lack of understanding. You don't have a job because you're too picky about what work you do. Do you have any desire to do whatever it takes? There aren't many companies out there that would hire someone without qualifications or experience. Don't take society for granted. Many people work hard in difficult situations to earn a living. Yet people like you, who quit their jobs on a whim because they got angry or didn't enjoy it, no one will want to hire them. He keeps saying he'll find a job someday, but at this rate, it's unlikely. I'll contact you through my lawyer about the divorce proceedings. Please do not contact me from now on, I stated firmly. What? How selfish. What's going to happen to us? Richard protested. At my words, mother-in-law flared up in anger. I put on a deliberately puzzled expression and responded to her hostile words. I don't know. Maybe you should figure out how to earn a living on your own, you heartless woman. Heartless? I don't want to be called that by you. Remember when you called me a parasite living off a measly $700 per month? Remember when you said that to me, your daughter-in-law, while holding a knife to my throat? By the way, the lazy person making $700 a month is right next to you. Are you not telling him to leave? I confronted her. As I spoke, mother-in-law started shaking with rage. Maybe I went too far. She leaned over and grabbed my collar. Stop it. I told you I will call the police if you lay a hand on her. My father forcefully pulled her off of me, but she was too riled up. So not only threats with a knife, but physical violence too. How barbaric. Don't you think it's better not to compound your crimes any further? I said, ignoring her resentful glare, and turned to Richard. I used to believe you would change, but I'm giving up on that now. I need to protect our son. I won't trouble you anymore. I'll take care of the money, the housework, and the childcare, so please come back. You'll take care of the money? Really? Even with careful budgeting, it's over $1,000 a month. Can you earn that? Richard's face turned pale upon hearing my words. He had never made more than $1,000 since he quit his job. But I have Mom's pension, he stammered. So, you're telling me you're dependent on my pension now? Mother-in-law couldn't keep her calm at Richard's absurd words. There's nothing else I can do. I don't have a job. Now I'm doing part-time work. Can we try to work things out? Richard pleaded. My father, hearing Richard's unyielding stance, finally spoke up. Richard, you and your mother have taken great advantage of our precious daughter. If I had known you were such a person, I would have opposed the marriage by all means. I will never let her step foot in your house again. I'll sever all ties. But I can't live without Emily. Please, give me another chance. Richard pleaded desperately. Don't joke with me. Can't live without our daughter? You're already planning to depend on her. A man who has no intention or grit to earn his own living and make his wife's life comfortable doesn't deserve our daughter. Leave now, my father retorted firmly. For the first time, I saw my father shout. It sent chills down my spine and seemed to shake Richard and mother-in-law as well. Richard was kneeling, his head bowed. It was a stark contrast to the charming image I had of him during our college days. Please reconsider. I beg you, Emily, Richard pleaded once more. But my parents wouldn't budge. They were fed up. I don't want to be treated like a slave by you two anymore. Please don't involve me in anything from now on, I explained to Richard and mother-in-law. As soon as we kicked them out of the house, we locked the door. For a while, they banged on the door and shouted. But as soon as a passing police officer addressed them, they ran off. Later, I heard that Richard was cut off by his mother and kicked out of the house. Now he's living in a rundown apartment, surviving on part-time work and struggling financially. Apparently, due to his short temper, he doesn't stick to one job for long and keeps switching between part-time jobs at convenience stores, construction sites, and so on. He's barely making ends meet. In order to pay me compensation and child support, he's juggling multiple part-time jobs and is unable to look for a full-time job. There were rumors that he's still going to the casino and may even be in debt. But I'm not interested. News of Richard's downfall spread quickly among our high school classmates, and I received numerous sightings and information about him. It seems that the neighbors have witnessed mother-in-law kicking Richard out and their frequent arguments. His unemployment and the fact that he was left by his wife became public knowledge. She must be feeling extremely embarrassed after boasting about her son all the time. She hardly ever leaves the house now. With the help of my parents in doing the housework and raising my son, I continue working. I now have more free time to spend with my son. I don't need to leave him at the child care center since my parents take care of him. So everything has been great. I wish I had divorced sooner. From now on, I'm going to cherish the time I spend with my son and watch him grow up closely. I caught my husband cheating. It's not something you see every day. Most people might confront their spouse if they find out they're cheating by checking their phone or something. But I saw it happen right in front of me in a place and time I never expected. I always had a feeling something was off with his relationship with someone else, but I never thought I'd actually see him cheating in public. My name's Christina. I stay at home with our 6-year-old son. The day I saw my husband cheating, he had a day off from work, and we planned to go out together as a family. But when I woke up, he was already gone. I got a message from him saying he was taking care of his sister, who had a high fever. He said no one else was home, so he'd be back in the evening. I felt disappointed. I had promised my son we'd go to an amusement park, and he was really looking forward to it. I knew my husband had been busy with a big work project lately, and he hadn't had a break in months, so this was supposed to be a rare chance for us to spend time together. But instead, he went to take care of his sister. She's engaged, so he could have let her manage on her own. But my husband has always been overly attached to his sister. He even told me he was attracted to me because I reminded him of her, which always made me uncomfortable. She's a lovely person, but being compared to her felt strange. My husband used to talk about wanting a son and daughter, and he used to initiate intimacy often. But since our son was born, that's changed. Now it hardly happens at all. We're still young, and he used to enjoy intimacy, so I'm worried he might be doing it with someone else. I understand. Forgiving someone for betraying your trust can be really tough. But what's even more frustrating is that my husband seems to vanish even on his days off, like today. It wouldn't hurt for him to spend some time with our child once in a while, right? Our kid adores him and gets upset when he's not around. But my husband seems indifferent towards our child. He doesn't bother with birthday presents or show up for school events. No matter how much free time he has, he often comes home early but just locks himself away to play games all day. He hardly even sees our son anymore. At this rate, our little boy, who used to be so close to his dad, might start feeling like he's just a stranger. And here's the thing, my husband keeps saying he's busy with some big project. But that's a lie. He's hardly ever home. So I asked an old classmate who works at the same company as him if my husband is really that busy. Turns out, my husband's not known for being a workaholic at all. People actually joke that he's more of a desk-warming employee who doesn't have much to do and always looks bored. He clocks out on time every day. Hearing this confirmed my suspicions. Despite claiming to be swamped with work, his paycheck hasn't changed much, and he never seems tired from working overtime. It just doesn't add up, and it makes me wonder if he's cheating. Feeling pretty frustrated, I finish making breakfast. When I checked the time, I noticed something odd. Normally, my son wakes up by 7 a.m., even if I don't wake him, but it was already past that time. If we didn't hurry, he'd miss the nursery school bus. So I hurried to wake him up. In his room, he was still fast asleep. I tried gently waking him by saying, "It's morning, wake up." But instead of a response, he let out a groan of pain. Worried, I reached out to feel his forehead. It was burning up. I called his name and gently shook his shoulder. He barely opened his eyes and said, "Mom, I can't breathe." My heart raced. There was an outbreak of a disease at the nursery school, and I couldn't help but wonder if my son had caught it too. I'd heard about kids dying from it, so I was seriously scared for my son's life. Feeling desperate, I tried calling my husband, but he didn't pick up. I couldn't wait for an email reply, so I reached out to my mom, who's a nurse, for advice. Following her instructions, I quickly made an ice pack and checked my son's temperature. It was really high, over 102.2 degrees Fahrenheit. I called an ambulance and made sure my son drank plenty of water while we waited. My mom mentioned it might be a heat stroke, too. Because of infection risks, I couldn't ride in the ambulance, so I took a taxi to the hospital my son would be taken to. I kept trying to reach my husband, even though I knew it probably wouldn't work. And as expected, it didn't. So I left him a message online, hoping he'd see it and show up if he cared enough. At the hospital, I waited outside the emergency room, praying for my son's quick recovery. In the past, I lost my father after he was rushed to an emergency room. I couldn't shake the fear that the same might happen to my son. But my mom, who was there to support me, kept reassuring me, saying, "It'll be okay. It'll be okay." An hour later, the doctors managed to save my son, but they recommended keeping him in the hospital for a week for observation, so he was moved to a hospital room. But my husband still didn't show up that day. The next day, I went home to grab some clothes for my son and decided to bring him some fruit as a get-well-soon gift. I also wanted to thank the doctor who had helped us. As I passed by the emergency room, suddenly, the area erupted into chaos. I noticed the commotion and thought I might be in the way, so I decided to delay my thank you to the doctor. Just as I was about to head to my son's room, I saw a man and a woman on stretchers. They were barely covered with a thin blanket and looked almost naked. "It seems they're still stuck together," someone commented. "It looks like it happened during intercourse." I couldn't imagine how uncomfortable that must be, and being transported like that must have been incredibly embarrassing. As I tried to pass by, I made eye contact with the man. Normally it would have been an awkward moment, but this was different. I was stunned because the man was my husband. "What are you doing here?" I blurted out in surprise. Well, I caught my sister's cold, and my husband stumbled over his words. I was completely thrown off. What were the chances my husband would be here, especially right after my son was admitted yesterday? Why was he naked and being wheeled in? And who was the woman with him? My mind was racing with questions. In the midst of my confusion, I locked eyes with the woman beside my husband. Even in my haze, I knew she was his affair partner, and I shot her a glare. Her face looked strangely familiar, and then it hit me. Why is Christina here? That voice snapped me back to reality. Of course, the woman was my husband's sister, Brenna. Time seemed to slow down in that moment. I had suspected my husband of lying about taking care of his sister and meeting another woman, but this was beyond what I had imagined. Even if he came to see our son, showing up stuck together with another woman, especially his own sister, was just too much. Despite my urge to confront them, I had to hold back and wait for their treatment since they were being taken away on stretchers. I knew they couldn't escape, so I decided to address the situation later. With that in mind, I headed to visit my son, my initial reason for being there. But inside, I felt sick with worry. Spending time with my son helped me sort through my feelings a bit. When I checked my phone, I saw a barrage of messages from my husband online. As expected, he was trying to cover up the situation, not even mentioning our son being in the hospital. I chose to ignore him and waited a little longer. After a while, the doctor who had treated my son the day before came by. With a smile, the doctor said, "Your son is doing really well. He's recovering faster than expected. His fever has gone down and his condition has stabilized. We initially worried about an infection, but it seems he had heat stroke along with a cold." The doctor praised me for making sure my son drank plenty of water, saying I was a smart mom. But really, it was mostly thanks to my own mom. I made a mental note to get her some nice meat as a gift next time. I thanked the doctor sincerely with a deep bow. But despite feeling relieved about my son's health, I knew I was about to face a tough situation. As my anger simmered inside me, I quickly adjusted my expression into a smile for my son's sake. "Mama's not mad, sweetie. I'll be back soon," I reassured him. Leaving the hospital, I called my husband, who had left me over 100 missed calls. The moment he answered, he launched into excuses. "It's not what you think. There's a reason," he started saying. It struck me that he had his priorities all wrong. Shouldn't he be worried about our son first? Well, a man so wrapped up in an inappropriate relationship with his own sister without a care for our son wouldn't bother worrying about him. I thought bitterly. With a husband like that, I couldn't help but worry about our son's future. I couldn't see any change in my husband's behavior, so I made up my mind to divorce him. "You were too busy with that, even when our son was suffering, huh? I bet you found time for it whenever you please, even with your own sister." "It's sickening." I spat at him. He was left speechless. "And just so you know, I've already informed your parents. I won't involve your workplace, though. It'd be a problem if you couldn't pay alimony and child support." Goodbye. With that, I delivered my final words to him. 3 days later, my son's health had fully recovered sooner than expected, so I completed the discharge process and returned home with my precious son. Of course, my husband was nowhere to be found. After that incident, my husband showed up in person to apologize, but I handed him the divorce papers I had already signed. He begged for forgiveness, pleading it was a mistake the first time. Please just forgive me, you're everything to me. But in a stern tone, I told him, you're still lying. Even now. I already know everything. Your sister confessed everything. I knew my husband wouldn't accept the divorce easily, so I first approached his sister, who was involved in the affair. Congratulations on your upcoming wedding, I said to her. Thank you. I wanted to send you a message, but I thought of a better idea. Want to hear it? She replied. You're not going to tell anyone about this, right? She pleaded. Oh, I plan to. I want everyone to see who you really are. It'll be crystal clear, I said with a smirk. Please don't. It'll ruin my life, she begged. Pretending to think it over, I kept smiling. Well, I guess I could keep quiet if you tell me exactly how many times you were with my husband. Then we'll see. Though your brother will still feel betrayed. What's your choice? Without hesitation, my sister-in-law spilled everything. Please, don't tell him. I'll tell you everything, she admitted easily. When I confronted my husband about his affair with his sister, he was so shocked that he fainted. When he came to, he signed the divorce papers and left our home feeling defeated. I hired a lawyer to handle our divorce proceedings, demanding custody of our son, alimony, and child support from my husband. At first, he tried to negotiate the terms, but when I hinted at revealing more, he agreed to my terms and left the lawyer's office. Somehow, news of the affair spread to my husband's workplace, and he faced severe consequences. A month later, he lost his job and had to take up a job in a food factory, putting strawberries on cakes to make ends meet. At the factory, he became the subject of gossip among younger colleagues, making him feel uncomfortable. Meanwhile, despite me not revealing the truth, my husband's sister's engagement was called off, and her reputation suffered. It turns out her boyfriend suspected her of cheating, just like I did, and hired a private investigator. She had to pay a hefty sum as compensation for the broken engagement and now works at a nightclub. Recently, her ex-boyfriend gave me a photo of them together, saying, keep it in case you need it. I was taken aback by his audacity, but I stored it away just in case my husband tries anything. I'll use it if necessary. For a fresh start, I moved back in with my parents and am raising my son with their support. They're sad they can't see their grandson often, so they offered to help as much as they can. I'm grateful for their support, but I'll only rely on them when I really need to. It's amazing how my son has been in perfect health since that high fever, almost like it never happened. He's even received awards for perfect attendance for 3 years straight. He seems to have completely moved on from his biological father and is enjoying life to the fullest. That brings me more joy than anything else. Oh, I almost forgot to mention, our family has expanded with the addition of Angel, the white cat who's now comfortably sleeping on my lap. Angel used to visit our yard often before we moved, and when I went to bid him farewell, he hopped onto my lap and stayed there. I couldn't bear to leave him behind, so I brought him with me to my parents' house. Now he's become close with my parents, and he's just as dear to me as my son. Looking ahead, I want to witness my son's growth alongside my parents and Angel. As I sit here on the porch, gently stroking Angel, that's what fills my heart with warmth and contentment. Emma smiled proudly, thinking she caught someone rummaging through garbage. Little did she know, this mistake would lead to her demise. My name's Sally, I'm 32. I work at a TV and film studio fixing costumes. We have all sorts of outfits there, from fancy historical ones to modern clothes for shows. I adjust them to fit the actors and repair any damage from filming. I spend my days sewing, using machines and irons. I learned sewing from my mom when I was young, so this job feels like it's meant for me. Even though the hours can be odd and the workload heavy, I love what I do and hope to do it forever. I met my husband Joe while working at the studio. He looked after the actors there. Since we saw each other every day, we became close over time. 2 years later, despite our busy schedules, we got married. But just as we started our new life together, my mother got sick and passed away suddenly. This forced Joe and me to delay our wedding plans. Originally, we were going to have a simple ceremony with family at a local church. But now we had to save up for a proper wedding and honeymoon. Since our work hours were unpredictable, we decided not to rent a place to live temporarily. Instead, we moved in with Joe's mother, Emma, at his family home. Both Joe and I had lost our fathers early in life, so we understood each other's pain. since my mother was the only parent left for me and Joe worried about his mother being alone. Living together seemed like a good idea. I wanted us to get along with Emma, but it turned out to be a nightmare. Emma didn't want to accept me as part of the family. To her, I was like a thief who stole her son. As soon as we moved in, she started harassing me. Emma's criticisms were relentless. She'd point out every speck of dirt, making me feel like my upbringing must have been lacking. I endured her constant nagging, pushing myself to clean until my hands were raw and bleeding. Her standards for chores were sky high. Cleaning, laundry, cooking, everything had to be perfect. If it wasn't up to her standards, she made me do it again without a second thought. And the more tired I got, the worse it got. No matter how hard I tried, she always found fault. I even remember staying up all night scrubbing the sink once. It seemed like she was never happy with anything I did. She insisted I handle all the household chores, and when I tried to balance them with my job by working from home, she only made more demands. Every day felt like I was living Cinderella's story, slaving away at chores. Did you finish the laundry? There's a torn curtain upstairs. Fix it. You're good at sewing, right, Sally? I'm sorry, I have urgent work. Can't the curtain wait until the weekend? I pleaded, hoping for some understanding. What are you saying? If it's left like that, who knows what the neighbors will say? Fix it right away. Emma snapped back, showing no sympathy for my workload. I found myself constantly juggling work and chores, often working late into the night because there was always something to do. Emma seemed to take pleasure in seeing me worn out. She was like a cruel bully, especially when Joe wasn't around during the day. Our relationship felt more like that of a boss and a maid. I did all the housework, but I couldn't easily talk to Joe about it because of my pride. I tried my best to fulfill my duties, but it wasn't just the physical strain that wore me down. It was the constant mental pressure. Sometimes, Emma would invite neighbors over for lunch, and those occasions were unbearable. She would be even harsher in front of them, and I could hear them gossiping about me. Seriously, she's such a terrible daughter-in-law. I have to correct her every single day. My son doesn't see it, but I'm not fooled. She's just so unlikable and clueless. I listened to the neighbors' laughter, feeling like they were agreeing with Emma's harsh words. It hurt deeply, even though chores could be finished, the hurtful words stayed with me. Every day felt like I was reaching my breaking point. If things kept going like this, I feared I might lose my sanity. But it wasn't just Emma. Joe had an older sister, Sarah, who was 38. Sarah lived nearby with her boyfriend and was quite tight with money. She'd often come over for lunch at our place, probably to save on food costs. What made it hard was that she never gave a heads up about her visits. So I couldn't prepare enough food for her. She'd just show up, eat, and leave. And she had this habit of claiming everything as hers. Things at her parents' house or ours, it didn't matter. One day, I finally spoke up, "Sarah, could you please let me know before you take something?" She must have told Emma about it. "Did you tell Sarah not to come over anymore?" Emma confronted me. "What? No, I didn't say that. I defended myself." "So you're saying Sarah's lying?" Caught between Sarah's deceit and Emma's cruelty, dealing with either one alone was already tough. But having to face both of them together made the mental burden even heavier. One day, as I walked past the room where Sarah and Emma were talking, their voices were loud enough for me to overhear. "It's like having a free maid." "How nice." "I'm jealous." "Send her to my house too," Sarah remarked. "Maid? Am I not a daughter-in-law?" I couldn't help but interject. I had secretly thought of myself as nothing more than a maid, but hearing it said out loud was unbearable. It felt like something inside me snapped. That night, I finally opened up to Joe about how I was feeling. "I can't do this anymore. I've tried to be patient, but living with Emma is unbearable. Please, I want us to move somewhere else," I confessed to Joe, feeling a weight lifting off my shoulders. After a moment of silence, Joe replied, "Okay, we've saved up enough money. Let's find a new place soon." "Really? I'll start looking for a place right away," I said, tears of relief streaming down my face. Little did we know, Emma was standing right outside our room, overhearing our conversation. We had no clue this would trigger her strange behavior later on. But from that day forward, the once oppressive days started to feel brighter. I had one dream, to wear a wedding dress that I had made for my own wedding. After all, sewing was my profession. Filled with determination after talking with Joe, I immediately ordered a large amount of fabric online. I decided to focus on making the dress as my new purpose. That's what I resolved to do. I began sewing the dress secretly in my room, away from Emma and Sarah. But one day Sarah, who often popped by unannounced, caught me. "Wow, what's this dress? It's beautiful to have your own handmade dress," she remarked. "Hey Sally, I'm getting married in 2 months. Could you make my dress too, please?" "Yes, renting is just a waste of money. I want to keep wedding costs low, so please," she insisted, true to her penny-pinching nature. I hesitated, but since she agreed to cover the material costs, I agreed to make it. I started working on Sarah's dress first, since our wedding was still far off. Sarah asked me to keep it a secret from Mom, hinting that she planned to tell Emma she was renting the dress to get financial support from her. Whatever Sarah paid me for materials, she was determined to get back. Her thriftiness was almost impressive. I even talked to Joe about it, and he said, "Sis never backs down once she decides something. I'm sorry, but it would really help if you could make it for her." With his encouragement, I agreed, feeling positive and motivated since I was getting paid. I saw it as practice for making my own dress without spending on materials. I also hoped it might improve my relationship with Sarah, so I focused on dressmaking between housework and my main job. Even Emma seemed to catch on to what I was doing. She'd occasionally peek into my room. Sarah's wedding was coming up fast, and the dress was almost done. Then one day, Emma came into my room with a smile. "You're working hard again today, aren't you tired?" Her sudden change in attitude was unsettling. "I'm going to make some coffee. Why don't you take a break?" she offered. "Really? That would be great. Thank you," I replied. As Emma left humming, I felt a strange unease. Emma making coffee for me? That was unheard of. Could it be something more sinister? Different thoughts raced through my mind, but I tried not to worry. I got back to work, adding the final touches of lace. The end was in sight. Despite it being Sarah's dress, I found myself putting love into it. Suddenly, I smelled coffee. Emma knocked on the door. "Sally, may I come in?" she asked. "Oh, sure," I replied. The next moment, I was shocked. Emma entered with a tray piled high with cups and saucers, all filled with coffee. "Emma, wait, it wasn't just for two," I protested. It looked like she was preparing for a party. The tray was so heavy her arms trembled as I instinctively moved to stop her from entering further. "Oops," Emma pretended to trip. The sound of cups breaking and coffee splashing everywhere filled the room. For a moment, I couldn't comprehend what happened. Everything felt like slow motion. Looking down, my yellow-colored dress was stained like a giraffe pattern. "Ah!" I screamed involuntarily. I did miss the brief smile on Emma's face. "Oh no, I'm so sorry. It wasn't on purpose. Did you get burned?" "Wait, is that a dress?" "I thought you were going through trash," she babbled. I was speechless. The shock of her actions left me frozen. Then Emma feigned concern. "Oh dear, you can't have your wedding like this, can you?" My suspicions turned into certainty. Emma was trying to sabotage our wedding. Her plan was to ruin our plans to move out after the wedding. But I couldn't afford to be angry now. I rushed to the bathroom with the stained dress, frantically rinsing off the coffee. I knew the stain would set if I didn't act fast. Emma watched with a malicious grin, offering help that I coldly refused. I was filled with anger and panic. Then someone unexpected appeared behind Emma. It was Sarah. "What's this? Are you bullying Sally again?" Sarah questioned, noticing the tension. "No, I just accidentally spilled coffee on her dress," Emma replied, seemingly enjoying the situation. But then things took an unexpected turn. "What? Are you serious? That's my dress." "Wait, what?" Sarah exclaimed, bewildered. Emma was speechless, realizing her mistake. "Yours, Sarah? What do you mean? I can't believe this. I had her make my dress. What am I going to do? My wedding is in 2 weeks." Emma panicked like never before, while I listened to the ridiculous exchange. I continued washing the dress I had been working on for months for my sister-in-law. As I washed, I realized something. I hadn't told anyone. I was making the dress for Sarah, so Emma must have thought the dress was for me. She wouldn't have deliberately spilled coffee otherwise. If she had known it was for Sarah, there'd be no reason to ruin it. Joe and I planned to leave this dreaded family home after the wedding. To Emma, I was always the intruder who stole her beloved son. She couldn't bear the thought of me taking him away. So she tried to sabotage our wedding, thinking it would keep her son at home. Such petty thoughts led to Emma's bizarre actions. Sarah was furious, blaming Emma and attacking her. How could you do this? Everything is ruined. I can't believe my own mother would destroy my wedding, she exclaimed. I'm sorry, Sarah. Please forgive me. I didn't know it was your dress. You don't think I did it on purpose, do you? Emma finally spoke her true feelings while I pretended not to hear and continued washing the dress. Then a man's voice interrupted. So you thought it was Sally's dress and deliberately stained it? Everyone turned around at once. Oh, Joe, when did you get here? I asked, surprised by his sudden appearance. Joe stood there with a mix of disappointment and disbelief on his face. I had been so focused on washing the dress and listening to their argument that I hadn't noticed Joe's arrival. He had been silently observing the ugly quarrel between his mother and sister. Joe began to speak slowly, his disappointment evident. You saw Sally working hard on that dress every night, and yet you deliberately stained it. That's truly despicable, he said sternly. Emma and Sarah were taken aback. Emma, in particular, had probably never imagined being scolded by her son, whom she cherished so much. Joe continued calmly yet sadly, I'm disappointed, Mom. Sally endured your attitude all this time, hoping that one day you might change. She was patient for my sake because you're my mom. His words brought tears to my eyes. I had mistaken Joe's kindness for indecisiveness and submission to his mother, but now I saw him as a man determined to protect the woman he loved. Joe's firm stance, though unexpected, made me fall for him all over again. He addressed Emma, and it all comes down to this. I can't overlook it, Mom. Sorry, but Sally and I are leaving this place as soon as possible. I'll stay until the wedding for your sake, but I can't stay any longer. This time it was just a dress. But who knows, Sally could be in danger next time. It'll be too late then, Mom. Danger? I would never put her in danger. How can you even say that after ruining Sally's hard work so casually? Emma's denial was met with Joe's palpable anger. Despite his frustration, Joe didn't resort to harsh words or an overbearing attitude. Instead, he quietly expressed his anger towards Emma. His expression, a mix of anger and deep sadness, was something I had never seen before. He was confronting everything he believed about his mother, who had always doted on him. Emma's usual quick wit and aggressive remarks were replaced by tears, leaving her speechless. Even Sarah was stunned, shifting her gaze between Joe and Emma. Later, Sarah decided to cancel her wedding, so close to the date, and she wouldn't get any of her money back. It's not my fault at all. Emma was the one who paid for it, Sarah insisted. So Sarah wasn't losing any money, but Emma seemed to finally regret her thoughtless harassment that had gone too far. The shock of being scolded by her son also left her weakened. But the consequences weren't confined to our house. Sarah's sudden cancellation angered her boyfriend and his family, leading to their breakup. Sarah continually blamed Emma for this outcome. After we left the family home, Emma occasionally contacted us, asking for money. One reason she didn't want us to leave was the financial aspect. While living together, we contributed to the household expenses, but Emma had no income apart from her pension. It seemed she had been relying on our money. Every time Emma called asking for money, Joe refused. Mom, why don't you work? There are plenty of jobs out there. We need to be independent, you and us. Please leave us alone, Joe pleaded. Despite Emma's pleas not to be abandoned, Joe remained firm. His sense of duty seemed to drive his resolve. Eventually, Emma found work as a janitor, which ironically suited her strictness with cleaning. It was somewhat amusing. Meanwhile, Sarah, after breaking up with her boyfriend and moving back in with Emma, stopped working altogether. She relied on Emma's part-time income and pension. I saw her once, and she was unrecognizably overweight. Joe and I moved into an apartment and are enjoying our new happy life, free from snide remarks and sarcasm. Our life now is blissful compared to our time in that dysfunctional family home. We finally set a date for our wedding, a small ceremony with just friends and colleagues. We chose not to invite Emma and Sarah to avoid any disturbances, especially considering their difficult situations. But that's how it has to be. They brought it upon themselves. I've started making a new dress for the big day. It's going to be much more beautiful than the one that ended up with a giraffe pattern.